Get started. Good evening and welcome to the May 19th, 2020 Select Board meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. First, I will read our information about remote meetings. As a preliminary matter, this Select Board meeting, I am the chair and I'm going to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Carlson.
Peter Carlson's here.
Doreen DeFazio.
Doreen DeFazio here.
Donna Stock.
Donna Stock here.
Ed Prisby.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tim McInerney.
McInerney here.
Rebecca Meekins.
Rebecca Meekins here.
Okay. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Candy LaValle.
Next, we have citizen comment.
Hi, I'm here.
Ray Mead.
Here.
Noel Powell.
I'm here.
That is it. Okay, good evening. This open meeting of the Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely.
Do you have any questions about the Aaron F. Sellers application?
The order, which you will find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. I do, Noel, if you could just put your mute on real quick, just until it's time to talk. Thanks. For this meeting of the Select Board is convening by Zoom conference, and it's posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join in. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and then take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided. Members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I know otherwise. We are now turning over to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, let's cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda after they conclude their remarks. I'll have it open up to our members, inviting each to provide comment, question, or motions. Please hold off until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. Excuse me. If members wish to engage with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After all members ask questions, I will open it up to public. We will do questions through the Q&A if the questions are appropriate for what we're discussing on the agenda. I will
Jen, you're froze.
These might be the internet issues she was talking about.
You want to pick that up, Doreen?
Yeah, I'm actually going to send her a quick text just to let her know in case she's continuing to speak, and then I'll just pick up and start the agenda until she comes back. That sound okay with everybody?
Yep. Looks like she's trying to sign in again.
Okay. Until she signs back in, I'm going to go ahead and get the schedule or the agenda started with number 1 schedule. So the first thing is on the agenda is a coronavirus update. Tim, do you want to give us an update on that?
Yes, thank you. I have a new microphone, so I'm hoping everyone can hear me a little bit better tonight than past time. So thanks to Bob Berger and the cable staff for setting me up with this Larry King type microphone on my desk. You can't miss it. So if you can buy the office when we're unquarantined, you might get a kick out of the size of this thing. Anyways, the coronavirus, the governor has released a 4-phased approach to reopening. Let me just back up. We had 1 case reported earlier today of new coronavirus report. It was reported in error. So for a couple minutes, we thought we had 75 total cases. We really only have 74 because that case was reported in error. So we had a couple days in the past week where we had 0, and then a couple 1 days with 1. So we report that as we go. So, and the Board of Health has conference calls weekly to talk to staff and to talk to the Health Alliance with regards to, what's still in each phase and what protocols and what's happening inside of government. So relative to that, we are following the governor's guidance for a reopening plan. His plan calls for 4 phases with 3 weeks between each interval or between each phase. And it's really to observe the health data for each phase and seeing if people are recovering or if their numbers trend upward relative to positive cases. So the data will drive direction into the next phase, and we will obviously follow the governor's direction. Today, we took part in a conference call with Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Keneally and others, municipal leaders put on by the MMA, just to get clarification around a number of issues from golf courses to restaurants. All information that we get that's on the state website or that comes out of their publications, we relay that information to the businesses and to the general public through press releases and Facebook posts. John Allen has been reaching out to businesses all along, from helping people apply for loans, for the PPE loans, and other operational related issues. Some of our businesses have opened as of, some were Saturday, some were Monday, but they look to be, anecdotally, as I drive around and I see things in operation like Scoops and Swirls or other restaurants, social distancing is being adhered to. The reports coming back from the Health Alliance are consistent with that as well. So it seems to be going smooth. As for the municipality, for us reopening following the guidelines of the governor, there's a couple constants that we are going to adhere to relative to a reopening plan. We're only going to have phases of opening that are safe to do so. We will continue to allow people who can work remotely and be effective at working remotely to continue to do so. We are aware of the population that is vulnerable in the situation, 65 years and older, and or immune compromised. We will want those staff people to stay safe and work remotely as well. So I'm just going to run through a couple broad brushes here relative to a comeback to work process, if you will. So we look to have staff, and these are, again, all predicated upon the guidance from the governor. We're going to live inside their checklist and their guidance for how we do this. We're creating a plan as we speak for safety protocols and distancing, which I'll get into as I go through. But in terms of broad picture views, we're looking to have staff come back June 1st, which is the week after next. And then, depending on data, June 8th by appointment or limited hours for the public to come into the building. We're still sorting out the best answer to that. So that has not been definitive for the 8th, but we do want to move forward with that. As the guidance came out, the 3-week piece between each interval, when we set our guidelines, was not known to us. So we're still a little bit behind. So we may end up adopting that 3-week window as well, but it's kind of a wait and see. So we are paying attention to what other municipalities are doing and what the state is giving us for guidance. But just again, a broad brush, June 8th by appointment or limited hours, wider opening, again, depending on data, for the 15th of June. Inside of that, the Council on Aging, Recreation, and Library, those remote facilities and those remote services, COA is not so remote, but we want them to open after we open for 2 reasons. One is we don't have a lot of resources in terms of custodial staff, so we don't want to overburden or have someone be left out of a cleaning operation. So we want them to have a staggered opening like us, but after we open successfully, so we can learn from our mistakes if we have any through the process. The main goal for Council on Aging as they open will be transportation. That will be limited to 2 or 3 people on the bus once safety glass or plexiglass can be installed around the driver's area to protect the driver. And that's in accordance with WRTA, and they're modifying the vans for that type of safety protocol. And inside of that whole transportation piece, there's a cleaning protocol that'll be adhered to as well. But we do get calls for transportation now, and we want to restore that as quickly as possible. Congregate meals is probably the next most important goal, and I'm not sure what the timing will be on that, but there will be, again, protocols set up around congregate meals that'll happen at the senior center. And then finally, for the Council on Aging, exercise classes are very important to the seniors. We've done video broadcasting of classes, and they've been well received. That'll continue until we can get back in the space safely inside the gym. But again, the Council on Aging will develop a plan consistent to ours that'll roll up into ours for a unified plan for restoring services inside the Council on Aging. Again, depending on data from the state and guidance from the state. The main goals for recreation will probably be determined by the state later this week or next. So the beaches, the day camp, those things are still up in the air. They're important to a lot of people. We hear from people a lot of the time about those particular pieces, but again, those specific guidance haven't been released by the Commonwealth. And then for the library, the main goal is to open when it's safe to do so, which is right now, I believe, in the governor's 3rd phase of his plan. So that's sometime in July, believe it or not. But when and if that phase happens, which I'm sure it will, the first phase will be pretty much getting staff back in the building. Of course, after we have a deep cleaning of the space, which we've already made arrangements for. But they'll take books back first. There's been a lot of outstanding books that we've, let people keep. We'll get those back. We'll quarantine those books for whatever period of time the state says is a good window. As a best practice, we'll have curbside pickup after that for materials, and no dates are set for either one of those or for opening to the public for the library just yet. But again, they will have a plan and protocols in place, along with signage in the building for employees and for visitors when they do reopen. So all of these aspects of operation do require a plan, and they will lend support to them. We will pay attention to other municipalities, like I said, for their best practices. The state, obviously, the Registry of Motor Vehicles has not reopened for service, but we'll probably take a lot of best practices from them, as they have a lot of people inside confined spaces. So we'll modify that. and adopt that as we go. Inside this building, we will take some precautions for staff precautions and for the general public when we do open. Some of them include simple things like changing the glass in the doors in the municipal buildings and the offices here. So the service, unfortunately, will be in the hallway just to keep that barrier. So we'll change out that glass into a piece of glass that'll have a slit at the bottom, maybe 3 to 4 inches. So if there's paperwork to be exchanged, that can happen seamlessly and still protect the employee and the visiting public. We will mark the floors with directional arrows. We will mark the floors with 6-foot social distancing. Things that are confined space, like the copy mailroom, there is only one person allowed in there at a time now, but we will continue that when we open. I've taken a lot of time already, but I just want to give you a sense for the things we have to kind of look at as constants in terms of face coverings when social distancing can't be met, the van, the daily cleaning protocols that happen now, that high touch services will continue to clean those. So we have to provide a plan. We will look to the Board of Health, and the Alliance for input, because there's a reporting requirement as well that, people feel that we're not operating safely in accordance with the plan, they can report us to DLS or to the local Board of Health. And we want to get their feedback and input before we implement to make sure we are going to comply and be able to answer those questions moving forward. In terms of gloves and masks and PPE, we're moving forward with cloth masks for staff that we'll provide, and then people who will self-certify basically upon entering the building and coming into work, telling us that they're not sick. We'll have to track those people according to the guidance from the state. Even visitors, when we open, we have to track those people as well. We will have one main entrance into the building. Staff will park out back towards the field, and the public visiting, when that happens, will park out front and use the front door and the front door only. There are a number of entrances to cover. I can't chain those doors for public safety purposes, so I'm hoping people will comply, both staff and the public, when we do finally open. So the other constant pieces are, if people are sick, stay at home. If you can work from home, we're going to keep that in place. And we have issues like high-risk staff, people who are 65 and older, and childcare is still an issue for some folks. So we are surveying the staff to find out what their overall concerns and worries are as well, so we can take those into account as they start to come back and integrate back into the workspace. So that's a brief overview of what we're looking at here in terms of reopening it in a rough timeline. It is subject to change. It won't accelerate, but it may slow down based on data and other best practices. That's all I have for that piece.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. I'm back. I see a question. Ed has a question.
Thank you, Jen. Tim, what role, if any, does the municipality play in local business reopening? For instance, do the businesses have to get re-inspected by the Department of Health?
No, they covered that today. They'll have their annual inspections as they're required to for their permits. But people who are essential don't have to do anything. People who are going to open just need to, again, self-certify, if you will, that they have a plan in place to keep both employees and the interface with the public safe, and have that plan on file. And then DLS or the local Board of Health or the Alliance can go in and investigate based on the plan.
Okay.
And all those things, I'm not to interrupt, but just when we started this conversation, those pieces are laid out very clearly on the reopen section of the state's website, and we either direct communication through John Allen to those businesses of what their checklist should be. The 25% requirement for the office space, not that we have a lot of office space in town, was tough to interpret. Even we had the Lieutenant Governor on today relative to, is it 25% of capacity, like what's on my building certificate for my occupancy load, or is it 25% of my normal day-to-day activity? Now, this building's 57,000 square feet, so you can imagine I'm never near capacity, but operationally, am I supposed to be at 25% of that? So that's one piece that they have to kind of think about and move forward and give better guidance on.
Have there been any requests or applications for outdoor seating from any of the local restaurants?
Not to my knowledge, but that was one of the questions that came up in the Lieutenant Governor's piece today, but I don't know that right off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Oh, one other question. Silver Lake is coming up. Do we need to have a discussion about what the plan is there?
We should, only after, when the Lieutenant Governor was on this today, she said information from DCR will come out this week or early next relative to day camps and beaches and swimming pools. So I figure we wait for the guidance first and then decide what the next steps are for the beach and for the Parks and Recs program.
Okay.
Doreen?
Thanks, Jen. Tim, just one other question regarding the WRTA transportation for the senior center. You mentioned 2 to 3 people on a bus is probably going to be the plan. I don't know if you know how many seniors typically ride the bus at a time, but do you know if there's any plans of the WRTA to add service just to make sure that anyone who needs to or wants to take the transportation, especially once we start giving meals again, is there any plan in place for that, or am I being premature in my question?
No, I think that when we took transportation off the table, we had 3 other providers that could provide transportation as backups. I don't know what they are, but the RTA, I asked them to pick up for us where we were going to drop off, and they didn't have any capacity, nor do I think they will going forward. So it'll be our drivers with the limited number of people in those buses. But those secondary 3 vendors, people can still call today and even in the future if they need transportation for shopping or medical appointments. Becca, I don't know if you can pull up, just so you'll know the vendors, just since we're talking about, if you pull up an old press release at some point, you can just cover those vendors for the group.
Sorry, I was looking at Q&A. Did any other board members have questions before I go to the Q&A? Okay, we have a question from Justin Wood, 5 Garden Street. When would board and committee meetings start to take place back in the municipal center? Earlier or only after we reopen for public entry?
It would be after that. Right now, the guidance from the meeting, the conference call today was, legislative bodies, if you will, are exempt from this 10-person or more meeting. But for planning board, ZBA, select board, remote participation, and the suspension of the open meeting or modification of the open meeting law requirements will remain in effect. So it'll be after. I'm going to take a wild guess. Sometime in August, you'll be away from this format and be able to go back into public spaces. But again, it's a guess.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'll go back to my announcements. I was told that's where I froze. So as everybody knows, the Memorial Day program this year will be held remotely. The videos and remembrances are going to be shown on cable Monday through Friday, and the exact times will be announced soon. So watch the town Facebook page for that. I know they've been working hard. Justin and Bob DeToma have been working hard on that program. The Community Preservation Committee is in the process of updating their community preservation plan. There will be 3 public forums held via Zoom in early June to gather input, and there is an online survey that they're asking residents to participate in. Information about the forums and a link to the survey can be found on the town website on the Community Preservation Committee page. The Recreation Department is holding a series of outreach meetings to present their plans for the Grafton Community Park, a place to be together. The next session is May 27th at 7 p.m. Please visit the town website for more information. Finally, Marilyn Wilcox, who has worked in the children's room at the Grafton Public Library for over 15 years, was awarded a Paralibrarian 1 certification from the Massachusetts Library Association due to her continuing education and increased duties at the Grafton Public Library. So congratulations to Marilyn. All right, next on the agenda, we have resignation. Resignation of Anita Patel. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, yes.
Yes.
I make a motion that the board accept the resignation of Anita Patel as town accountant effective June 12, 2020, and send a letter of our appreciation and thanks for her time and service to Grafton.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'll just say I'm really sad to see her go. Anita has done a great job for us over the last 4 years. I understand she's just going upstairs for a different job, but I know I'll miss her. I think she's done a terrific job, and thank you, Anita, for all your hard work. Did we need, I'm sorry, did that motion have a effective date? Okay, thank you. So I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
DeFazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. Motion has carried. Thank you. Next, we have beer and wine license for the farmers market, Aranap Cellars. So Noel Powell is here to present on that. So Noel, if you just want to give us a brief overview. I know you've had a beer and wine license for the farmers market with us before, but I will turn the floor over to you to let us know.
Yeah, so we've been part of the farmers market for at least 3 years, I think now. And as plans for safely running markets are getting put together, we're seeking to come back to be able to offer our farm wine for sale at the farmers markets this summer. We will be following the market COVID guidelines to make it as safe as possible for all the attendees as well as myself. And that at the moment that includes no sampling. It's for sale by bottle only, and keeping social distancing within the market.
Do any board members have any questions? Nope, I don't see any questions. This is one we've done before. So do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move the board vote to approve a seasonal wine beverage license to Aranap Cellars of Westford, Mass. for the Grafton's Farmers Market 2020 season, contingent upon the market being able to open in compliance with the governor's orders.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Stock eye.
DeFazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion has carried. Thank you for coming, Noel. And hopefully things will go well this summer. Hopefully you guys will be able to sell some wine.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda is intent to sell 32 Daffodil Court. Tim?
This is an intent to sell. You vote on these quite often with the authority, not the authority, but the blessing of the Affordable Housing Trust, which I think there's a memo in the packet relative to refusing your first right of refusal.
Thanks. Does anybody have any questions on these? We do these quite often. The unit will stay. They will help us to keep that unit with affordable standing. So it's not that we lose the affordability piece on that. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to not exercise its right to purchase the affordable unit located at 32 Daffodil Court.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
DeFazio, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Thomas, aye. The motion is carried. Next, we have select board reports, and Yeah, we'll start with select board reports. Is there any member of the select board that wishes to give a report? Ed?
So last Thursday, the Grafton Sustainability Commission met and we went over the draft of the benchmarking report. I think we've got something that's very, very close to being released. We went through all of the data that we had, the conclusions that we made based on the data. There were a few items that we are checking on, and then we are providing graphs and illustrations to go along with the broken out data. We plan to meet again a week from this Thursday, where we hope to finalize the draft.
Would you like to be placed on the agenda for a specific date?
I think the next date, let me just look at my calendar. The next date after that makes sense would be the 2nd. So let's shoot for 6/2, assuming we meet that day as scheduled.
Okay, I'll put it on the agenda.
Thanks.
Any other, Doreen?
Yeah, I have two quick things. One is the next EDC meeting is going to be held on June 8th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. So I just, I had mentioned to the board last time we met, we were going to discuss the Shop Local campaign and what to do moving forward. So that meeting will be scheduled for June 8th. And the second one I want to bring up is a couple of weeks ago during the TA report, Tim brought up recycling and curbside pickup increase, and that we're going to be looking for a new contract next year. And I was just thinking about the option of revisiting we could call it Sustainability Committee, we can call it Green Grafton, we can call it a Recycling Committee, whatever we want. But I'd like to put on the next agenda a discussion, and I can provide a new charge to maybe find the best and creative alternatives to save money when we do have that contract. We did it 10 or 11 years ago when we changed our curbside to recycling. And I think that it's important knowing that we basically have our vendor telling us there's going to be an increase in recycling, there's going to be an increase in your curbside, and we're going into an override year. This is an opportunity for us to be proactive and maybe put a committee together that we disband once we have this one discussion. But I think putting a group together to collaborate, see what other communities are doing, see if composting makes sense to lower recycling. I don't know what that is, but I'd like to revisit that and put it on the agenda for next time.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Donna?
The Disabilities Commission will be hosting their first Zoom call this Thursday at 6:30.
Thank you. Peter, did you have anything or no? No, okay. I have a couple things. One, the open space and recreation plan. We're meeting tomorrow night to hopefully finalize that open space and recreation plan that's been kind of hanging out for a long time due to staff changes both at CMRCP and in our office. So hopefully we'll be reporting on that soon. Also, the Affordable Housing Trust met. We're moving forward on figuring out how to provide rental assistance. Chris McGoldrick in the planning department is still gathering information, and we're coming up with a plan to be able to distribute that. So those are my two things. Oh no, I have one more thing. I'm sorry. I wanted to get a sense of the board. So I did get a communication from Colleen Roy. She wanted to know if we were going to invite the citizens petitions in to speak to the board. At this point, they typically go to finance, but I just wanted to see if the board chooses, would we like to invite all the citizens petitions in?
Madam Chair, what would that format look like? I don't think the select board's ever done that before, but I'm not open or closed to it, but what do you suggest the format would look like for such an event?
Yeah, it is. It would be new. I do think in thinking back on other citizens petitions in the past, did we ever have anybody come in? And I do believe when the plastic bag ban came up, they requested to come before the board, but I think that was well in advance of the warrant. And I think that was just kind of to get feedback on whether or not that was something we wanted to move forward with. So I guess it would just look like we give them the floor for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and they can talk about their petition. I would assume it is something that we don't really do. I know Finance Committee does invite all of the citizens petitions in to talk about it to Finance Committee. So yeah, so you guys let me know, I'm just sharing. I just am looking for some guidance, what you guys want to do.
I'm fine with it.
I don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Part of what our role is to provide leadership for the town, and to the extent that we want to better understand citizens' petitions before they get to town meeting floor, to the extent people are looking to us for an explanation or what this would mean for the big picture policy that we're supposedly in charge of, I think that's fine. Just for everybody to remember, petitioners as well as the board, there's a reason why the citizens petition is set up the way it is, so that citizens who want to put something before the legislative body don't have to go through us first. So it would be an informative session to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But, to the extent that it's helpful for people to understand prior to getting to town meeting why someone is bringing something, then I think that's fine.
Doreen?
I don't need it, but I don't have a problem with it. And if we do decide to put it on the agenda, would it make sense to have it under public comments and just have it be, as a citizen, and we use that time just to have it be public comments. So there's no Q&A from the board or anything. It's just an opportunity to speak on the citizens petition.
Donna?
I like that compromise. As I said, I think it's setting a precedent that opens up a wide range of possibilities coming before a select board in the future on issues that may not be appropriate. But if they want to come for public comment, that's fine with me.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, so Jen, I guess the request from Colleen to come and have people speak with regards to their own citizens petitions, and you mentioned the one about the plastic bag ban, how they did come to the select board, and I think I loosely recall that process happening. So what action did the select board, and when you were on there, what action did the select board take as a result of that meeting? And was it appropriate?
My recollection is the select board didn't take any action because, again, it's a citizens petition and it's not, there's no action for us to take. It was just more to keep people, to keep us informed of what they were thinking and what that citizen wanted to do. So there is no action to take by us.
So I guess to the point earlier from the other members, I guess if somebody wants to come and talk about their citizen's petition to us, and like to your point, use the public comment section or ask to be specifically on our agenda, I think that's fine. But to invite all of them, to your point, to the point that Donna made earlier, I don't know if that is a good use or appropriate for us, right? So if 2 or 3 people have petitions that they want to submit and they want to come to us and talk to us about it, I'm fine with that. But to have this blanket invite, I agree. It would be, the whole point about citizens petitions is to have citizens petitions outside of select board and town administrator and planning and TPC and all that. So I would be fine with it if it's within that context.
Okay, Donna?
Just wondering whether or not Ray has any input on this. I mean, I think citizens petitions have the opportunity to speak at town meeting to plead, their reasoning or their information that they want to share with the town meeting members. I don't know whether or not it's required for us to get anything else because there's no action that we can take. So just wondering.
Jen, I will say that, the board has reviewed all the warrant articles, even the citizens petitions, for people to come and promote their citizens petition. That's really totally up to the board. You're going to do that at town meeting. You're going to talk about your petition that you put up. You're going to present it. You're going to talk about it, and that's where you do it. As you do it at town meeting. It should go through the normal process that the board reviews every warrant article. That other people who, the police department doesn't come before the board and say, we really need 3 cruisers, we really need this, we really need that. It's all done through the process. So that's for, it should just go through the regular process. That's all. That's my opinion.
Donna?
Yeah, I think we closed the warrant, so there's no need for us to have any more information. Public comment could have come in at any one of those other occasions when we had the warrant up for discussion. So we didn't hear from anybody at that point. So as I said, I think town meeting is the one that decides from this point forward whether or not that's approved or disapproved. So we've just placed it. We've done our responsibility. We've done our leadership in showing that we want to put the warrant in front of the public.
Okay, I do have a couple, I do have a comment from Anne Marie Foley, who was the last citizens petitioner with the plastic bags or polystyrene. There was no action taken. It was simply informing the select board at the time of the petition as it impacted the citizens of the town. So just clarification there.
Do we want every other petitioner to be treated the same as Anne Marie and have the opportunity to do that? I mean, we're not taking an action, but we do hear from people. That's all.
She's also saying, let you know that we went before almost every board in the town at the time, not just the select board. Doreen?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten into this discussion yet on the agenda, but as we get into talking about town meeting and how we're going to handle town meeting, I think there's going to be discussion on essential articles, keeping things as short as possible for people. And in this current environment, I don't see an issue with having people who have citizens petitions, especially since historically we've done it before, come during public comment. We don't have to say anything or do anything, but there may be a lot of limited time at town meeting discussions this year. And that's what I would anticipate. And so I don't really see any harm in allowing any sort of discussion as long as it's under public comment with the understanding that there's no Q&A with the board.
All right, anybody else? If not, we'll move on. I have enough information. Any other select board reports? TA report.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. On May 20th, the Department of Transportation is holding a virtual capital improvement investment priority for Central Mass. So they're due on that list of projects for municipalities and for the state are due on May 30. We had an internal meeting relative to the priorities for Grafton. And if someone else has things they want to add, I can always add it to the memo. But basically, whether it would be included or not, the MBTA station in that parking lot is always at capacity. So that would be one. The culvert on Westboro Road would be another. That's been in disrepair for quite some time. We looked at either Chapter 90 or the Road Stabilization Fund or a combination of funding sources to fix that. George Hill Road needs to be reconstructed. We know those numbers are pretty high for George Hill, so we would ask the Mass DOT to look at funding that. Sidewalks along Route 30. If we're going to have a transit-oriented development from the train station down to the Afonso project, sidewalks would be pretty important. Milford Road, sidewalks along Milford Road would be important. Traffic light signalization project for North Main Street, those 3 signals going up 140 are critical as we develop that area and the train and the movements and all of that. The Main Street project, we know that's funded, that's slated for 21, which is great, but we added that to the list too, just so we can let the state know we have priorities if the board has others that it thinks we should add. The other one I did mention is Worcester Street. It's a state road, and they just did it last October, and now we're digging it up again for water line, but I could not coordinate that any better than what happened. So that area in terms of complete streets, which the state is pushing, that should be a priority for sidewalks that are contiguous and ADA compliant. They are for the most part, but not 100% through the whole area, especially by Extramart going over that culvert by the by Homefield Credit Union. So those areas on both sides of that culvert need to be addressed, and by Ekblau Landing. So all state road, really the state should take that on. So that'll be added. That is added to the list. Whether they'll do it or not, it's quite a different story. But we wanted to add those 7 or 8 projects as priorities for the town of Grafton. For relative to COVID-19, the Mass Department of Veteran Affairs noticed us that we usually get reimbursed on a lagging period from the Department of Veteran Affairs, but they have given us a statement that quarterly payments will be very, very expedited for Chapter 115 benefits. We get reimbursed, I think, 75% of the total for those benefits to the veterans who live in Grafton through the Veterans District. And also I got a call last week from the state rep, David Meridian, about a technology bond bill that they were working on. And he wanted a program or a project that we needed to get funded. So for a long time, we've been talking about Verizon dropping their copper lines and not servicing them any longer. So we would need to convert them to fiber. So we've asked for that. We've also asked for additional receiver site to improve radio transmission in South Grafton. So we included that cost. And then the live scan print detector, which is an automatic finger printer, goes into databases to catch the bad guys. That is been on our capital list for a while. So this is those are 3 things we've asked for from David Meridian to hopefully get into that technology bond bill. If it does, we can get those things funded. They were due on Friday. I haven't heard back, but I want to let you know that we were asked that and we responded accordingly with those 3 particular projects. As for the town election, I know this is on the agenda, but I will just tell people again that we're encouraging residents to vote by mail. We are trying to encourage them through social media, through the police department's Facebook page, the town's Facebook page, the website. And much like the COVID-19 mailer we did several weeks ago, the town clerk is slated to mail that out Friday to encourage people and inform people about the dates that are set now for town meeting and the election and the ballot questions without any favor for anything one way or the other, but just simply stating what's on the ballot. So that's happening thanks to the clerk's office. And Thursday, we submitted the application for the Safer Fire Grant. So we reached out to the legislative delegation, to the state and federal offices, and we do have letters from the governor's office and our state rep and our state senator. So the request was just over $500,000 for federal share. It's a 3-year grant, which will pay 75% for the first 2 years of a firefighter salary and 25% for the final year. So it's a little over $500,000 is the request if we're granted it. I think we have a good shot at getting it, but we did line up support from the federal delegation and the state delegation with that application. It was due Friday, but we applied on Thursday. So we look forward to hopefully hearing back in August or earlier to see if those funds become available. And then just a couple quick other points. 8 Pine Street, this morning we had our second interview with 2 proposers for 8 Pine Street for that redevelopment. The committee that did the interviews will meet tomorrow morning to have a final review and huddle about what we think the best recommendation to the select board will be, so we can come back to an upcoming meeting and recommend to the board one of those two proposers. We did receive comments back from the local historical commission and Mass Historical as well. So we'll incorporate that into our thought process, along with the double bottom line of the best bang for the buck and the amount of money we can turn back to both the Commonwealth and to the town. So we hope to have that P&S, at least a recommendation on the second, and maybe a P&S the following week would be great. So that's what we're striving for. As for the street lights and the LED replacement, we're at 70% complete. We're looking to be 100% complete by the end of May. And we just accepted Anita Patel's accountant's position resignation. So we have that advertisement out this week as well for replacement of Anita. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Tim? Okay, moving on, correspondence.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So we received one correspondence through the regular Board of Selectmen submittal process. And basically it was regards from Lydia Bogar, expressed concern about opening of Silver Lake, asking if the Select Board and the Board of Health will keep the lake closed until at least July 6th. As you heard, we got an update from that tonight. That's been, I think that's in process of being handled. And we did receive another correspondence over the weekend, but for some reason, I guess it didn't make it to Joanne, but I was asked to read it in its entirety. It's a good evening, members of the board. I'm writing to you this evening as a member of the Finance Committee, but also as a taxpayer and resident of the town of Grafton. The afternoon, the Assistant Town Administrator provided Finance Committee with a contingent budget of what would be restored in the fiscal year 21 if the override passes. While I support some of what the Town Administrator is proposing, there are other recommendations which I hope the board reviews. For example, the Town Administrator intends to restore all salary increases that were removed from the budget post-COVID for both municipal and school employees, including the 19% increase to the town clerk. I'm at a loss. It appears as if your Town Administrator is trying to kill the override. We are in the middle of a pandemic where people are losing their jobs, and Town Administrator thinks asking residents to increase taxes to give raises makes sense. I implore you to direct the Town Administrator to provide a contingent budget that only supports essential services such as education and the fire department. The Town Administrator needs direction from his bosses to provide a budget that protects the essential services this wonderful town provides and residents need the most affordable override possible. Sincerely, Mark Haddad. That's all I have. Thank you.
Peter, can you make sure to send that to Joanne because she did not receive it?
She did later this evening. I did do that, but thank you.
Okay. Discussion fiscal year 21 budget. I know Becca gave a presentation last week. Do any board members have any questions on the budget? Okay. Town meeting and election timing discussed.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. I do. So following up on Mr. Haddad's points, I do have questions about where we're going with both the contingent budget and the budget post-COVID. How should we take those in order? Probably start with the post-COVID budget first.
Sure.
Okay. Tim, when you put together the post-COVID budget reductions, and for the benefit of the people at home, we're talking about the budget as it would look with no override in the present fiscal predicament that we're all in. Did you assume a percentage decrease in state aid when you put this together? And if so, what percentage are you assuming?
Well, you have to start that we had an increase of state aid in our original request or our original budget development. We level funded state aid, which I don't know if that was a 2% number. Becca would have to tell you the percent, but I just level funded it, which led us to a $617,000 reduction in revenue.
Okay.
That's when we started probably 3 weeks ago with this discussion, maybe 4. So we had $617,599 of total revenue estimated loss for fiscal 21, much of that being in motor vehicle being level funded from what we thought we would get, permit fees, marijuana, and state aid being level funded. So we don't anticipate a reduction for where we are level funded now, but we took out whatever increase the governor's budget had in it for fiscal 21.
Okay, so what are we basing that assumption on, that there won't be a decrease? I know I just read in the paper that Milford ran their budget anticipating a 5% decrease in state aid.
I don't know what they base that on, but we have no guidance. I thought we were being conservative by taking no increase and just leaving it at 0. I don't think we'll be reduced from fiscal 20's budget, but we could be.
Okay. And then going through this, you'll have to refresh my recollection, but there's still some sizable percentage increases in here that stuck out to me. Number one, human resources on number 153. We're
going from a part-time to full-time.
Okay.
Now this is post-COVID. I should probably just take you through, just as a reminder, and I don't know if Becca can share the screen, but the reductions we made to cover the 617,599 included the reserve fund for the finance committee, a reduction of expense of 25,000, a small GIS MIS reduction of 2,000, police department equipment was 12,000 reduced from the budget. Fire department expenses was 2,400. Fire department equipment was 102. The highway department was $150,000 reduced. And the hope there is to either restore it if the override were to pass, or if it doesn't pass, then you use Chapter 90 to offset or to do those programs under the highway department. The library reduction was 11,000. Finance committee personnel was $112. I'm sure that was a rounding issue that we just found $112 on. The assessor personnel was $31,446. Town clerk was $10,510. Planning was $30,593, which that is a reduction of losing the economic development coordinator. Reduction in the building inspector's personnel line, $943. Highway personnel was $1,976. Parks and cemetery personnel was $1,881. Council on Aging was $2,772, and then not hiring a couple of library people at the end of the fiscal, which totaled $17,599. And then recreation was $710 reduction. And then the school department out of that whole mix was $52,180. So we had a delta in terms of the reductions, and to balance the budget, we looked to use either stabilization or free cash in the amount of $197.21.
Okay. So I guess my question is, this budget is in place assuming that there's going to be no override. If there's no override, we don't have any more levy capacity beyond this year, and we're going to have to make do with what we have indefinitely for the foreseeable future. So with that in mind, I wonder why we would make the change from human resources from part-time to full-time this year. For instance, shouldn't we keep things pretty much as they are going forward?
As much as we can, we want to. Are you talking post-COVID, no override? That HR component is critical in terms of getting accounts funded and paid and people paid and payroll processed. I mean, there's a whole health insurance piece of it. Becca can tell you the day-to-day of what Joan will be doing starting in July. I do fear that I'll be short-staffed no matter what if I'm not to fund that at that level. But Becca, can you chime in on the difference between the increase for the HR number?
Yeah, so it's about $20,000 going from part-time to full-time, Joan. over the course of the last couple of years while she's been with us, she's taken on a lot of additional responsibilities, some of which are municipal, some of which are school related. She does the school payroll payable. She assists the schools with their payroll when they have issues. She, oversees a lot of the employee benefit signups and, scheduling the health fairs, managing the retiree piece of it. Moving forward, we would like to get her to do a lot more training, work around training, because there are dollars for us to be found there in terms of reductions off of our insurance. For town insurance, the more trainings we can do, the more we can get our staff on a regular training schedule, which unfortunately right now we just don't have. That will pay off for us on the other side, on the insurance side. And so I see that as kind of a trade-off. And when we first, we're putting together the budget, made the determination to have Joan go full-time, Joe Layden had just left us. We brought Chris on at a significant lower rate, and those dollars we shifted over to HR. So I see your point. I just think there's a lot of financial benefit to her going full-time in terms of, money we could get back. I try not to think of it as just plus 20,000. I do think that there's a positive trade-off for the town there, plus all of the work that she does for us on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the last thing you want to do is be penny wise but pound foolish. And if you can make a spending increase for a position that could save you money in the long run, that's fine. It's just that's hard right now. It's hard to make that justification. Similarly, for line 630, we still get a 15.5% increase in personnel for Recreation Commission. What's that one?
We were planning on using revolving account for a program coordinator. So the funds wouldn't be general fund tax dollars. It would come from the revolving account to fund that position.
So if we don't spend those funds from the revolving account for that position, can they be used for anything else?
No, Becca, you can answer that better than me, but I don't think.
Yeah, so it's not exact. So the way we set this up is pretty similar to the way we set up costs that are offset from like the sewer department. They pay the town back for work that the town does on behalf of the sewer department from the enterprise fund. So we would fund it in the general fund, the recreation position, and then at the end or at the beginning of the fiscal year, a transfer would be made from revolving accounts into the general fund to offset dollars.
And that money that's going into the revolving account is going to be reliant on programs in town that are generating money for that account, right?
Yeah, we've been having regular conversations with Jen about how, the upcoming season may impact that, particularly, if the beach doesn't open, if she can't have camps. She does have that money right now. So if she chooses to move forward with the part-time person this fiscal year, she has the funds in those revolving accounts to do it. It's kind of uncertain as to what, this upcoming summer, how that will impact the revolving funds long-term, and whether or not that person could be kept on in future fiscal years. That's sort of the unanswered question right now.
Okay.
Just by way of a complete topical example of cost savings, we have a number of plans. We have 173 retirees in 3 different plans. And where the cost saving is for us is getting the right plan at the right cost for the right people. So we try to steer people into programs that are beneficial to them, of course, but also are, since it's a 50-50 split in some cases, or 60-40, if we can reduce our share on that by having someone helping the retiree or even the active folks pick plans that are more advantageous, that's a critical role. That if you're not hands-on during an open enrollment and guiding people that to those right plans, it's I can't quantify the number because I don't know, I'm not in the room when they pick their plan, but those things are critical. Giving them good choices, but at a better plan design that saves us money is one of the things that this position does and will continue to do. But if we miss them because they pick a plan that's more expensive, it costs us more money.
No, I appreciate that. And again, I think every time we talk about this, please be mindful that I'm aware that, our need to minimize expense often, I think, creates a situation where a lot of people don't want to go into public service to begin with, which drives up demand for these positions. Like you said, there's no real training to be an assessor these days. You don't go to college for that. There's no major for it. You get on the job training, and there are fewer of these people out there, and they tend to cost more as time goes on. That having been said, we've got to explain, the five of us, to the people watching this and the people out in the community, why exactly there are cost increases right now, particularly where, state aid is going to be an issue. So that's all. I just want to know these things. And then I have a question, if you'll indulge me, on the contingent budgets. So I think I share the same philosophical issue that Mark Haddad does with the contingent budget. And this sort of goes back to where we were in 2015 after the override. We sort of started to operate as business as usual. And with this contingent budget, we're doing the same thing. We're repeating the same mistakes we made way back when. We're jumping right back into really large raises and requests from some departments that they don't make sense. Regardless of whether or not we pass an override, we are still, again, going to be in the situation with COVID where it's going to be difficult for people, and it's going to be hard for them to stomach 10% raises for certain departments at this time. So why would we consider passing this as opposed to something much more pared down and frankly a lot closer to the post-COVID reduction scenario?
Which I guess I'd ask, what do you want to reduce out of this list?
Well, let's go through it if we have to ask that question. So town clerk, for instance, that one was a raise, right? And no disrespect to you, Candy. This is the situation we're in. What's the, I know what the justification is, but why would we include that at this point?
Well, I included it because it was in the initial proposal. When we faced COVID, Candy was like, given everything that's going on, take it out.
Well, let's talk about some of this stuff again, because it's been a couple months since we went through this. The $150 for the highway, what does that involve?
That is their professional technical. So everything from line painting to guardrail replacement. They have program activities they do every year with that $150 that's in their expense account. And you would look to reduce that line item and apply for every project individually for Chapter 90.
Okay, so why don't we just have them apply to Chapter 90 for those projects? We could do that.
Because you'd be taking away from bigger projects that you were planning on doing with Chapter 90.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, there is a real impetus here for us to demonstrate to the town and to the taxpayers that we can operate as leanly and efficiently as possible right now. And it would be an enormous, I think, selling point for us to be able to strip this down and go back to the voters with a contingent budget that recognizes that the override is a significant ask and we are in a financial crisis in the country right now.
I agree. I just got to think about when we passed the override for the roads, and that was to get us on a program to deal with that backlog. The Chapter 90, along with projects, we're supposed to pay for engineering for those bigger projects that stabilization account was going to fund. So you would be repositioning yourself or pivoting away from that purpose. And whatever's on this list, if the board wants to vote to tell me to move something, I'm completely fine with it.
Doreen, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the discussion that, I have to agree with the philosophy of, increasing even just the the sell to the town of increasing taxes and then giving raises just doesn't sit well with me. And so I think it makes sense to go and, have these hard discussions. I'm not saying that I want to take away our Chapter 90 money or projects, but I'm glad we're having this discussion. I don't have a solution right now, but I do agree that timing is everything. And, if we're asking people during this difficult time for an override and there is 20% unemployment out there, we have to make sure that we're making these hard decisions and going through the budget and over and over again. And so giving any salary increases that we don't have to give is a tough decision that we have to make. And I can't say that I'm in favor of all the increases on here. So I may have a motion in the future.
I want you to think about an equity issue relative to this discussion we had with the school department. If you look at this total reduction plan for the $426,000, $52,000 is borne by the school department. We try to minimize and hold them as harmless as possible. We had early discussions about philosophically, let's not give pay increases to anyone who's not under contract. And we didn't have that in parity with the school district. So they were going to move forward with pay increases for their folks. It's a kind of a difficult spot for me to be in to advocate zero increases for our staff when the school department continues to grow their staff. That's a tough place to be. You can do it if you make the motion to do it. It's fine. I'm unaffected, right? So I made the deal I made. I'm zero, so it doesn't matter. But there are other people in this organization that will get pay increases that'll, eclipse the reduction that the school department's made under post-COVID.
I just don't like that philosophy about pitting one side of the town versus.
I'm just stating a fact. It's about parity.
Well, I mean, sort of, except that one side of the town has about 300 something employees and this side of the town has significantly fewer. So let's just look at our budget and see what we can do on our end to make it a little more affordable for taxpayers. That's all.
Okay.
Hey, Madam Chair, go ahead, Donna, sorry.
Donna?
I don't agree with that, Ed. I believe that the school administrators should be taking the same stance in providing additional funds for the school department by not taking raises this year. Tim negotiated 0%. I thought Jay was doing 0%, and I learned that he's doing 2%, and the rest of his staff or administrative staff are also getting raises. And I just don't think, if the argument is in this climate we shouldn't be doing raises, then there should be equity on both the school side and the town side. Our percentage is much lower than theirs.
So as a basis for that argument, you're comparing a superintendent's contract to a town administrator's contract?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's stop right there for a second. They're two completely different positions, okay? Tim has his master's in public administration. Jay has a doctorate. Jay oversees hundreds of employees. Tim oversees significantly fewer. And Tim is getting upwards of a $15,000 raise next year, okay? So
No. He is not getting a 50.
He's getting a significant raise next year that you guys
He is not getting anything for sure. It's up to. Nothing has been
it's up to the people on
decided.
board, right? So at the same time,
He could have gotten 5% this year, and he got 0.
okay, but he can get upwards of $15,000 next year. Okay, but
Or
this
you
is
could see
it's
it
all
get
beside the
0
point.
again next year.
It's all beside the point. This isn't the way you want to run the town. You don't want to run the town pitting one side of the budget against the other. You want to take a look at your individual line items and determine how you can provide the service that you're providing now in the cheapest, most efficient way possible during a recession. That's all. And this whole thing about competing with one side of the town versus another, it's completely beside the point. It's completely inefficient, and it just doesn't matter.
Donna?
I see CEO, administrators, executive positions across this country all giving up a percentage of an increase this year. It's happening at our institutions. It's happening across the board in a number of places. And as I said, I thought there was an agreement that Jay would be doing a 0% and Tim would be, doing that as well. And the school department decided not to honor that and go forward with increases. So I'm just, as I said, in this time, I think it's appropriate for everyone that has that type of salary to provide themselves, some back to the town.
I'm sure.
Peter?
Thank you. Hi. Lots of things being said here. One of my proposals that I would like to see as a model here going forward, not only for the balanced budget that's before us, as well as the contingency budget with regards to the override, but potentially maybe doing something this one time, this 1 year, and basically foregoing a majority of our capital projects that we leverage free cash for to do a number of things. And I know that this is a hot topic with some people, but when you look at the situation we're in and we're trying to figure out what is an amicable solution to, one, maybe maintain level services under a balanced budget, but two, how to maintain level services even under a contingent budget. But if the objective here is to limit the exposure of raising and appropriating additional taxes on either front, then maybe potentially using $800,000 or so from that free cash allotment that we put into capital projects to put into not only the balanced budget, okay, and put those positions in there that were reduced and so on and so forth, but also apply it here to this contingent budget. And that way, in the, let's say the likelihood that the override does pass, we won't have to raise and appropriate those funds for the next fiscal year. We will have a good balanced budget moving forward. To your point, if it's the, so many hundreds of thousands of dollars here that we're trying to do, there is a pot of money, but it does have some risk involved with it. But if you were to ask me, is that a risk that I think the town could absorb for 1 year? I think it really does before it can get itself back on its feet for another year or two. And then, if the override does pass, maybe we do implement it in a more judicious factor where we raise very little bit at a time to really give people a little bit more time to get back to, pre-disaster, right? So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but Doreen, to your point, looking at another solution, there is that pot of money because we do vote for that in a separate warrant article. It is leveraging one-time monies, but we're kind of doing that right now with Mr. McInerney's proposal of leveraging stabilization, which I'm not a fan of pulling out, okay, just to let you know. And if I can avoid that and say, Peter, what would be your second option? Well, my second option would be, guys, let's discuss how do we feel about giving up those capital items this year and directing the town administrator to reallocate those monies for the balanced budget that's proposed and also for the contingent budget, but we won't raise and appropriate those tax dollars for next fiscal year.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm having a little hard time following you, Peter. So you're suggesting that we don't do any capital projects this year?
I suggest that we forego any capital projects this year and we use those one-time monies for the balanced budget to restore the positions that were cut in the balanced budget, and that we also use that money again for this contingent budget in the event that an override does pass. In other words, try not to use any override money for next fiscal year if we can utilize this one-time money here in free cash.
So Peter, if I may, just so I can restate, you would minimize the impact of the taxpayer by doing that, but you would draw down stabilization. And I would think you might want to add, if you have, No, not stabilization, Tim. No, we would leave stabilization alone, but you would take whatever we have that we set aside for capital. I forget the amount, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but whatever that $800,000 amount that we have set aside for capital projects this year, and utilize those monies and subtract out those liabilities that we have that are leases. We understand we got to pay for fire truck, and I think there's another lease in there or two. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we would take that delta, and we would apply those changes from that warrant article, and then move them into the operating budget for next fiscal year.
So when we read the motion at town meeting, it's to raise and appropriate to the limit without touching the override, and raise and appropriate or transfer from free cash for the purposes of the operating budget.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, you could do that as well.
What items are on the capital list?
You're
Well,
gonna,
let's have that
Fund this
discussion. I
year.
think that that's where I was getting at, Madam Chair, is let's look at that capital list. Like you said, it's a great start. But then really look at it and say, are these things that we can do without this year? If maintaining public safety and education are the primary focuses and other essential services that we all are near and dear to our heart, I'm willing to have that discussion with the board.
For Peter.
Ed?
So are you saying not only not raise and appropriate for the capital, but you're also saying not raise and appropriate from the road stabilization? Just don't do it.
I don't know if not doing the road stabilization is in the, that's not what I was talking about. It was just,
Okay, I was
it was
just
just the free cash that we use for capital plan. I was not looking at the 1.5 million, no. And that, believe me, and the way I look at that, guys, is back in 2014, 2015, that would be disingenuous of what this town is expecting their taxes to go towards to fix. But the leftover monies from, or the monies that are generated in free cash, on the other hand, well, that could be up to discussion. That was stuff that was unintended that we typically get left over after every fiscal year, but it could go into the operating budget.
Okay, just checking.
Any other comments? Is there a motion? Peter, are you going to make a motion?
No, Madam Chair, I wanted to discuss that tonight with this, well, with the board, because part of the budget is that capital list. So if we were to take a look at the capital projects, and if the board is in agreement that that's a good idea, then maybe we have Mr. McInerney go in and remodel what that budget would look like without the capital items, okay, to see what will be restored under those essential services to move forward.
two things I just want to mention relative to fiscal 20 and the closeout. There will be some significant turnback reported from the school department for the end of this fiscal, and police and fire will have some significant turnback, which is great. And our revenues are outpacing our expenses right now as well. So 20, I've never had any trepidation with 20. So there will be some turnback, which will help our free cash balance when it gets certified in September, October. Right now, you're using in the contingent or in the budget reduction plan post-COVID, you are using, I think, 124,000 to offset those articles, those things for police and fire for equipment. So you're using free cash there. So we'd have to do some math on, the balance, what the balance is after that, and then using stabilization into a free cash to 190,721. That's the total amount you're going to need to bridge the gap from the reductions to get a balanced budget. So there's already planned to be uses for free cash for operations. We just have to be eyes wide open. If it were to fail, that would be a lot of money. If the override were to fail, it'd be a lot of one-time money into operations that the cliff would be dangerously high at the end of 21 if it were to fail.
Well, right. We're in the same boat regardless, Tim, right? I mean, to me, I think it's a risk worth examining with that data. I don't want to make that decision tonight without that information in front of the whole board, so we can all ask the questions that I think we may have about that. But remember, it's only about the FY21 capital list only that I'm looking to utilize those monies for, not the other warrant article items that are about public safety that we have for police and fire that are separated out when you reduce the line item expense and move them over to those articles.
You're okay doing it for that, in that instance, for the operation of the fire and police, for that 124, and the delta for the post-COVID budget from revenue reductions. You're okay using that one-time revenue to offset those costs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But is that something you can put together for us?
Yeah, we can update the capital plan to be just leases only, what the balance of free cash is with this scenario, and then the scenario going forward in the event that the override were to not pass and balance the budget with those one-time monies. We could do that.
Ed?
Yeah, just a question for Peter. So if I'm following this correctly, the point is, if we do it that way, then we don't have to use stabilization to make up the difference?
You wouldn't have to use, right, that's the first objective there, Ed, is that you wouldn't have to dip into that 197.21 stabilization, okay? You can leverage that with the free cash that was already been certified that we would use for capital projects. So in essence, that's one of the dump trucks at the DPW. I'm not saying that should be, but I'm just saying that's the equivalent of what that amount would pay for, give or take a truck or a truck and a quarter. But moving forward, let's say the override does pass, okay? And to a lot of people's points about raising taxes and about where we're at right now, if we could still forego capital items and perhaps examine using those, even the free cash in the contingent budget, maybe we lessen the burden for this year. Like I said, it's capital projects that we can decide if we're going to forego them for 1 year. Does it matter whether we use them in the balanced budget or the contingent budget for that purpose?
Yeah, it's just the practical applications of this during COVID are bumping up against my philosophical point with capital, which is, not addressing capital needs as they come up is a little bit like not contributing to your 401k that's matching. You're ultimately in the long run, it costs you money. While it might save you money right now, it's 10 years from now, you're going to regret that you did it. And we're all in this position now because people in our position 30 years ago were in the same spot where it's like, well, we need to pay our staff more. And so we're just going to, forego capital. The building's fine now. It's not going to fall down this year. And then the five of us now, and the people that were in our position over the past 10 years have dealt with the reality that buildings do need to be replaced. And each and every one of us hears from constituents who all wonder why we're building so many things. When the reality is, the stuff was getting old. It wasn't kept up over time. And now here we are. So I'll have this conversation for sure, but I have reservations. That's all.
I have reservations as well, mainly because we've all had discussions about capital, like Ed had said, and we all deemed it important enough to include it in the override. There's $800,000 in the override for capital because we all know how important it is to do those capital projects, and then to not do it. Already the plan for the override now is to not raise and appropriate that first $800,000 for capital anyway, to reduce the cost of the override in the first year. So now we're not going to do any of those capital projects, and then we're going to take these capital projects away as well. It just seems, makes me very nervous.
It's just a plan, guys. I mean, it's just a discussion item, and I know it does have a lot of its pros and cons, and each one of you has your philosophical beliefs on this, and I respect those entirely. But I'm not looking to make this a policy going forward in perpetuity. So this would be like one of those one time where I think it's worth having the discussion, taking a look at that to say, is maintaining services in the event of what's happening today more important than capital or less important? And that's something I think we also have to examine, because there is a decent pot of money out there that is set aside for that, that I do think we need some direction from this board on. I think it's a pretty reasonable way of looking at making up some expenses that or revenue that we may not have next year to keep our town whole.
Okay, I'm sorry, we have a couple questions real quick. Katie Brown, 28 Follette Street. Would that lower our credit rating as a town? I'm not quite sure, Tim. Would that relate at all or not, our credit rating?
I don't think the AA plus will go away. We certainly won't be in a position, globally it's going to be tough. Generally speaking, if you use one-time monies for operations, that's a problem. That's when you have a structural deficit. We've not had the luxury of doing that, thank God. But if we do, is it problematic? Yes, but given the background of COVID, to balance things, it could be okay for 1 year. I would say if the override were to pass and we're going to, have excess levy in which to show the lending community we have capacity to pay back our loan, the upgrade, I think, is imminent, and I think that the interest rates will be the same we've enjoyed for 10 years, sub 2.5, sub 3, definitely. So it's difficult to say. I know I gave a long answer, but there's a lot of variant that goes into a bond rating and to interest rates that we get. You just enjoyed a very good one for 1 year. I got to do this all again in April and May to have bond counsel, bond rating agencies rate us on our fiscal health. If you used $1.6 million, that's a round number in my mind from what I'm looking at here and what Peter's talking about. It's not that total number yet. We haven't done the math, but if it is that number, that's a little bit concerning. But I will remind the board with the beginning of my report relative to 8 Pine Street, there's $60 to $80 million worth of investment on one parcel, and the sale of that. And this is why I just want to go through the use and the rationale in my mind for stabilization versus free cash is for the transparency of putting that money back into stabilization to prove to the community and prove to the bond rating agencies, hey, we had an idea, we're going to close on this property, we split the proceeds with the state of Massachusetts, and we put whatever money we used out of stabilization right back into stabilization. We've had that commitment for 10 years. With snow and ice, we've done it. We put it right back on 2 occasions. So, I just wanted to, that's a good talking point for us to have when we go into those bond rating calls. So that's why I was leaning more towards stabilization than I was free cash. But whichever one the board coalesces around, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. So long answer, I apologize.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the questions. We have another question about Chapter 90. So going back just a little, because I don't know if I didn't see it. Colleen Roy, 53 Elmwood Street. Previously, the town administrator stated $100,000 could use Chapter 90 and would not affect projects. He said they would all still get done. It's just a tedious process. Is that no longer true? We're using Chapter 90, now affect projects being completed.
Well, there's 2 pieces. The 150 that's on the line item is 100,000 of Chapter 90 utilization and 50,000 reduced from the tree line item for them. So projects that are in the operating budget, we would make application for through Chapter 90 to get those projects done. If the state doesn't bless those projects, then they won't get done. So there's a third party that I'm kind of at the mercy of, but generally speaking, projects like we do in the operating budget that has that 100 grand slated for, those generally are allowed under Chapter 90.
Did I see any hands up? Ed?
Just so I was sort of ready to move on to a couple other questions if everybody else was all set on the on the contingent budget, if that's all right. So I sort of was thinking about the FY21 budget and the contingent budget and the override proposal kind of as one issue. And I had gotten to thinking about, what, if anything, that we could do. So if the override passed for people that were feeling the pinch as a result of COVID. And I started looking around, and obviously the Department of Revenue is responsible for exemptions and tax relief, and a lot of that is the purview of Beacon Hill. But there are communities, for instance, Mendon, that do provide local tax relief, and they have a tax relief or a taxation aid committee that they set up through the assessor's office, the treasurer collector's office, and the senior center. I was wondering if this is something that we should start talking about, given the environment and given our previously stated concerns, and given the override proposal, that contingent or complementary with our override proposal, if we could put something in place to provide people who have lost jobs and income as a result of the present crisis, if that's something that we could set up as well, or at least start talking about.
Ed, would that be just for people that are now in a position that they feel like they can't afford their taxes, because we have people even pre-COVID that feel that way. So
Yeah,
would that
and-
program cover both or just one?
No, just one, because we do have programs in place for people now who both exemptions and abatements and tax deferral programs, for people who, in 2014 when we did this, were feeling the pinch. But in particular now, I feel like the issue in the community, just from the people that I'm talking to, is the uncertainty of it. There are people that are employed now who aren't sure what their employment situation is going to be 6 months to 12 months from now. There are people who are unemployed now who may or may not be going back to work anytime soon. And these people all would like to be able to continue to fund the services that the town provides at the level the town provides them, but would feel a little bit more comfortable giving the okay for our proposal if they knew if they had a problem going forward, they could come to the town and apply for some sort of tax relief. We could set it as a limit based on the increase of the override over the course of the next year at $100, $200, $500, depending on people's qualifications. I think it's an idea that we should explore, given that other communities are doing something similar.
Who would administrate it?
So,
because our staff already, our assessor is already working terribly hard, and you don't want to give her a raise. So,
we all have to work terribly hard. This is times when the community can come together. The Taxation Aid Relief Committee for Mendon, for instance, is comprised of the town treasurer, the assessor, and 3 appointed seats whose terms appear to be rotate over 3 years. So, a combination of volunteers and staff.
Doreen, was your hand up?
Thanks, Jen. Through you, Ed, do you know if this was put in place pre-COVID, or is this something they just did recently?
This is something that looks like they've had going for about 4 years. It says here that at the special town meeting on March 21st, 2016, the town voted unanimously to accept MGL Chapter 60, Section 3D, allowing for the creation of this Taxation Aid Committee. So this has been in place for 4 years now.
Doreen?
I'd be open to that discussion, and maybe if we could get copies of what Mendon has in place, just as an example, and we talk about it at the next meeting.
Sure, I'll send them around.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. We've always tried to do everything we can. I wasn't aware that there was another law, another lever we could pull for tax relief, because we've maximized every state law there was. I had thought. But even then, I would be open for something like this anyway, because there are people now, regardless of COVID. I know we do have abatements, but I think about it like anybody else's kid is going to college in the fall or in college now, and the federal government tells you how much you get in financial aid. And I can tell you, it's not what you think you should get in federal aid. They think you can pay a lot more than you can pay. And so I feel like the same way, these abatements, the levels of the abatements, a lot of our people in town don't qualify for these abatements, but they still need help. So I think that, any system that we can have to help those people should be pre-post. We should be doing it anyway. I just was not aware there was another state law that we could use. I don't know how, if that's something that was just recently passed. I don't know.
One other question through you, Jen, to Tim. Are we, I think the answer to this question is yes, but are we maxed out on the senior exemption? Because it's like Jen said, you apply for these and you'd be surprised at, the people you think would qualify but don't. So I want to make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's to make sure that we're giving the maximum exemption to seniors that we can.
Yeah, based on their qualifications and our ability to manage the work for the senior work-off program with the one staff we have being Barbara, who kind of deploys those workers in the application. So those two pieces have to be met. I have to have work for them, and they have to be asset eligible, and they get the maximum that they can earn, which I believe is the minimum wage that gets put towards their tax bill. So yeah, I think you are right, yes. Now just clarification on this Mendon, I'm looking at the site, I'm just trying to figure out, the law that they adopted in 2006 is the committee, but has the committee made recommendations or set up funds to offset taxpayer burden?
So I was looking at that, and I don't know yet. It looks like they had started a fund to try and offset that, made up of voluntary contributions, but we'll have to iron out, the details of what exactly it is that we want to do.
All right, because I don't want to miss, like Jen, you guys say it, we have this list and we think we have the maximum. We went to town meeting, you guys voted on different eligibility, age requirements, maximum income and assets. I thought we stretched the limit. We're inside the envelope, but we stretched it completely as wide as it could go. If there's other things, I don't know about them, and I will find out what they are and get you to adopt them as soon as we can.
Sure.
Okay, anything else? Ed?
I promise I'm not trying to prolong the meeting. On this topic, override outreach, is there anything that we're planning for forums, outreach meetings, communication with town voters about this? I feel like we haven't done as much as maybe we could.
I think this was something that was done in the last one. Where members of the select board and school committee met jointly, right? Answered questions. I'll be up for that if it's something that the school committee wants to do as well. Maybe to answer specific questions about their budget and what it means to them, and we can answer questions about our budget and what it means to the area where we have more jurisdiction over.
Anybody have anything else? Doreen?
So are we going to plan that? Maybe reaching out to school committee and seeing if we want to schedule, something that would look like a public meeting that we typically hold, in the senior center or different locations in town, that we just do a Zoom call and just specifically to answer those questions.
I can reach out to the chair of school committee and set something up for us in the school committee to answer those questions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, are we done with the budget, or we still have questions, or? Okay, we'll move on to town meeting and election timing discussion. Thank you, Candy and Ray. The sun has gone down and Ray's outside, and now he's in the dark.
I actually had to turn the heat on my screen now, so.
Okay. But thank you for coming. As you know, Governor Baker has given some directions on how to reopen. I think everybody's cautiously optimistic, but again, there's still so many unknowns. So we still just need to have this conversation about town meeting and election timing. I will start. I'm very concerned about the safety of town meeting, even with everything, even with us taking all sorts of precautions and social distancing and all of that. I'm very nervous about people not coming because they feel like it's not going to be safe, and I want to make sure that everybody that wishes to participate can participate. And before I stop, I did have a comment. Karen Galvin she's watching. in case questions for the Board of Health come up. So Becca, I don't know if you can make Karen a panelist, the chair of the Board of Health.
Yeah, I can, let me just find a,
Okay, thank you. Just so that we can have this conversation. I'm sorry, I'll let somebody else comment while I'm trying to figure this stuff out. Does anybody else?
So, yeah,
Go ahead, Ray.
yeah, we had a meeting last week, and we've actually just have had a lot of discussions about town meeting. I think that and this is something that we're trying to get information back from the school department, but between the auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria, we can get about 450 people in a space that would require 36 square feet per person. If you add the gym, cafeteria, and auditorium in the middle school, you can get another 450 people. So that's 900 people. Now, one of the things that we discussed was the override. Now, a lot of people want to come in and talk about the override, and a lot of I would like to say that a lot of people like to come to town meeting and talk at town meeting, but they don't. We get about 200 people at the annual town meeting on a $66 million budget, which is kind of disappointing. But that's the average that we get, is about 200 people. Up in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, over this past weekend, they had a vote at a town meeting that was only a vote for one item. And they did drive-up voting. They had 2 lanes. They had checkers at one area, and then they handed you a yes or no piece of paper. You drove around. You got to the end, and you put the yes, or you voted. You put the yes in the yes box, and you threw the no away, or whatever it was. We're kind of fortunate at the high school to have quite a stacking area from Providence Road in, around the school, and out of the school. Now, I would guess that, it's tough to say what kind of percentage, but I would guess that 80% of the people who are going to vote for the override, they know what they're going to vote right now. And we haven't even had town meeting. And there isn't going to be anybody that's going to convince them any other way. They're going to vote yes, or they're going to vote no. They don't want to hear the debate. They don't want to hear any of that stuff. They just want to vote. So if we can put people in, or allow people to be in those 2 spaces, the middle school and the high school, and get close to 1,000 people there that wanted to go to the meeting and wanted to vote, and then we moved the override to the last article, and we had the people vote on the inside of the high school, or wherever we are. And then we opened it up to drive-by voting. I think that would work. It did work in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, and it worked very well. It does take a little bit more coordination on Candy's part and on the election workers' part, and just setting it up, putting them under tents and whatever. But I think it would work. Now, we also discussed being out on the football field, which I wasn't in favor of, to be outside, because there's less control on everything. But you could put 1,250 people on the football field and rent jumbotrons and a stage and all of that stuff. And if it's 85 degrees, then you got ambulances there and people passing out. You got to provide toilets. You got to provide drinks. You got to provide all of that stuff. And if it rains halfway through the meeting, it rained. So the idea of having it outside is just not going to work. I think that if we can get 1,000 people in 2 buildings, I think that would work. I think that if we could do the drive-up voting, I think that would work very well. Now, it's going to take some coordinating, but I think we can do it. And it's social distancing. There's no one's getting out of their car. And we can social distance inside the buildings. So what do you think?
I do have a couple questions of clarification real quick.
Well,
Is the-
Jen, I don't take questions on Tuesday nights and it's too late.
Well, these are from the public, so
Okay, go ahead.
Terry Turgeon, right, are the numbers with 6 feet of distancing, how many came out for the high school vote? Do we have enough space capacity with 6 foot distancing to accommodate those for the same numbers? I guess just looking
So the high school vote, was a different thing. We had a little over 2,000 people, and we could all sit next to each other. Both school, I mean, the high school at the time, which is the middle school, was absolutely packed with people, but they didn't have any other option to vote. So they were just there so that the people were just there so that they could vote. This gives them another option.
Another question, should we consider to vote over several days by precincts?
No, you can't. You'd have to keep town meeting open and I would have to stay there. No. No, I can't leave until town meeting's over. No, you would vote just like you would at a regular ballot vote. You know, cars would come up. As I said, the people who were sitting on the inside would vote first. They could leave. It would be the last article of the day. The only thing that we would have to do once voting was closed was count the vote and close the meeting. You would do it just like a regular ballot vote. When the line runs out, the vote's closed.
Donna?
Ray, I guess I'm not certain. What if we have other votes that we want to take? How are you proposing that we deal with those?
Well, here's the thing is that if you want to be at town meeting, you will go into the building. You will vote just like everybody else. There'd be a moderator in the auditorium. I mean, in the auditorium, there'd be a moderator in the gym. There'd be a moderator in the cafeteria, and all of those spaces. All those votes would be counted inside the building. So any other votes would just go just like they would normally go. We won't be using the clickers, and it would be all, a standing count or a hand count or something like that.
Before I go to Doreen, I just want to announce that Karen Govan is on the call. I forgot to do that. I'm sorry. So just, can you hear us, Karen? Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. I saw Doreen's hand go up.
Thanks, Jen. Through you, Ray. First of all, thank you for trying to come up with a solution for this. I mean, I don't think there's any great answer, and so I'm open to anything. I will say, it may make more sense to sort of front load essential articles that we know that people, and what I mean by essential is the ones that we know that people are going to draw a bigger crowd to town meeting. So whether you're a person in a car or whether you're a person who wants to come into town meeting, it's the override, it's a few other articles that you may feel compelled to come and vote on. So would it make sense, knowing that one of the issues with COVID, and Karen can maybe, talk about this a little bit, is the less time you're around people, the better, that the people who want to come in and vote on these essential articles can do so at the front of the meeting. Those people leave, and then we have less of an issue of a crowd. And then the second thing I'll say is, we hold open town meeting because it's the purest form of democracy, right? And so we cannot turn people away if they do show up. And I have a concern that more people will show up than we predicted, and we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for people's public safety first and foremost, knowing that this is our legislative body. We can't turn anybody away. And what's our plan for that to ensure, instead of just counting the numbers, I feel like we need to have a backup plan to our backup plan.
No, you're absolutely correct. We need a plan B. There's no doubt about it. You know, again, if you want to vote, if you want to speak at the town meeting and you want to vote on all of the other articles, and again, I'm basing it on the average that we normally have, 200 people. And we will have space for 1,000. If we go into the classrooms or whatever, you know, that could be a plan B. The municipal center gym could be a plan B. But I would not expect that if we had drive-up voting, that we would get more than 300 or 400 people. Just basing that on experience, I don't want to, you know, we would never ever turn anybody away, and we would always have a plan B. But I think the drive-up voting would work for a lot of people who are only going to vote on one article, and that would be it.
So Ray,
Peter?
yeah, thanks for giving that proposal. My only question to you is how do you handle when someone amends the article in town meeting floor?
Which one?
Does it matter? I'm saying, like, what do you? What is, so in this case, someone's driving through, but they may not have known that the article's been amended.
Well,
That may
here's
change their vote. That may
here's
change
the other
their
thing is that you know, when I was talking with Tim the other day, and Candy and Becca and Jen, and this can be broadcast over an FM station. It will also be broadcast live on Grafton Cable. So if you were in the parking lot, you could turn to an FM channel, and I probably should have brought that up. You can turn to an FM channel and listen to the discussion. So people would know if something got amended or substituted or something like that, you know, and to amend or substitute an override would require a really, really good reason for any moderator to accept an amendment to an override.
Well, they'll just be amending the contingent budget, which we.
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, that's all we're talking about here. We're not talking about the.
No, the contingent budget is right along with the right along with the existing budget.
Yeah.
So that's not something. What I'm talking about is taking that whole override and moving it to Article, and I can't remember how many articles there are, but Article 45. That's the last article. There's nothing else. All town business has been done since, you know, up to that point, and the only thing you're going to talk about and the only thing you're going to vote on is the override.
I have a couple. I'm sorry. I have a couple things, Ray. I do appreciate, you know, the out of the box thinking and such, but I do have a couple concerns. The first one is people go to town meeting for a lot of different reasons, and some people may not care as much about the override vote, or maybe they do, but they also care about other items on the agenda. And I kind of feel like if we give one article more attention than the others, it's not really fair. If somebody really cares, say, about marijuana, they have to sit through a whole meeting, but if you only care about the override, you don't have to. There's kind of not it's not equal. There's, you know, the access point is not equal if your item is not that. I would also be concerned about taking votes both in the car and on town meeting floor, because I would wonder if, like, you were watching and you saw that, oh, 100 people voted yes, and 50 people voted no, and you saw that live, and that would drive who else showed up. So you'd almost have to keep the votes totally secret until it was totally over.
Yeah, the override would be a ballot vote. It really needs to be a ballot vote, no matter whether you're inside, you're outside, you're driving in your car or whatever. So going to your first comment, people sit at home and watch it on TV and only show up when they go to an article that they want to be involved in. That happens constantly. That happens at every town meeting. All of a sudden, 50 people will walk through the door right before Article 17 because that's what they want to be involved in. And then Article 17 gets voted up or down, and then they all leave. So I think my proposal, I'm sorry, Don, I'll be done in a second. My proposal is just to, one, have town meeting, have it safe with social distancing, and let everybody vote on what they want to vote on. If they want to vote on everything and they want to be there, they can come into the meeting and sit down and stay or come and go as they want. If they do not want to go to the meeting and all they want to vote on is the override, then they can drive by vote. That's my, and again, I'm not forcing this. I've been in, thinking about this, how to do it, how to not, how to get it done and get it done so everybody's happy, but not everybody's going to be happy. It's just, if there are other suggestions, that's great. We still have time, not much, but we still have time to come up with other ideas.
Donna?
I think Ed had his hand raised before I did.
Ed?
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, just a quick question about the classroom setup. I just want to think about this logistically. If someone did want to speak concerning the contingent budget and they were outside of the main auditorium, how would that person alert you that they wanted to make a comment?
So that's actually a good question, Ed, because that was another thing that was discussed, of having a microphone on the outside of the building, that if somebody wanted to talk, that they could come up and talk. Here's one of the issues. You can't speak at town meeting unless you're registered. So again, this would put a little bit more work on Candy to have someone outside registering, if possible, if somebody wanted to speak, and there would be a mic outside there. So again, that was something else. I don't have all this written down. I keep it all up here in my ass, and sometimes it doesn't always come out.
So Ray, would you need a moderator outside as well?
I would just need one person out there at the mic. That's it. Yeah.
What about in the classrooms? Would you need moderators in those classrooms?
You know what? The classrooms are you wouldn't need a moderator in the classrooms. You would need a mic in the corridors. The classrooms would just be a place for people to sit in social distance. So you would have a microphone in the corridor. If somebody wanted to come out of the classroom, go to the microphone, they could speak. There would be someone there. I wouldn't expect to use the classrooms, but again, that's the plan B.
I just read through some of the questions. I'm sorry, Donna, just real quick. There's a little confusion about what's voted on at town meeting and what is at the ballot. So the override is on the ballot for the June 23rd election. It's the contingency budget that would be voted on at town meeting. So that's the only warrant article on the warrant that deals with the budget. So this is I just wanted to clarify that, Donna.
So same thing. I know you're trying to be very creative, Ray. I think you used the Hopkinton example and you said there was one major question, that was how they did the drive-by. I do think we have a couple of other things that are somewhat controversial. I think there's the extension of our marijuana licenses, as well as the super park, that I think different constituencies would come out. whether it's for or against either of those. And I'm also concerned about registering all people if they're waiting in the parking lot and you've got two people in the car, you're gonna have to register both of them before they can cast a vote. And does that happen continuously during the meeting, or are you only doing it at the override? Can we, all of a sudden have 400 cars show up and register, and how long of voting that would take? I know there's no easy answer, but I am concerned about everybody getting their opportunity to weigh in on different things on the warrant article. We've got so many articles that.
Well, you couldn't do the drive-by voting on more than one article. It just wouldn't work.
Why not?
You couldn't do, because people would be, I don't think people are going to be sitting in the parking lot waiting to vote.
Well, but what if we had the meeting, discussed all of the articles and did not vote on anything, just went through all of the discussion pieces. People didn't vote on anything in the room, and then they drove by and they filled out a ballot with all of the articles at the end of the meeting.
You can't do that.
No?
No. You can't, if you put a motion on the floor, that motion has to be seconded, discussed, voted on, and closed. It can't be done in a group. It can't be done at anything like that. So that is the process.
Okay. Donna?
Yeah, can't be done.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ray.
That's okay.
Just one clarification. I mean, you'd also have to know the number of people that, because you're going to need a 2/3 majority or whatever it is for that particular warrant article. So you're not going to know that until everybody goes through.
Correct. Yeah, you would have to, it's a ballot. It's just like, how many ballot votes have we had at town meeting? You get in line, you walk up on the stage, you register, you rip your yes and no in half, you put it in the bucket, and you walk off. When that line is gone, you count the vote.
Ed, did I see your hand up? No. Okay. Doreen?
I'm sorry, Doreen. There's no easy solution here. There really isn't. The only easy solution is to hold off town meeting until you can fill the auditorium, fill the gym, fill the cafeteria. And ladies and gentlemen, that's not going to happen this year. It will not happen this year. Not only because of the virus, people are not comfortable even if you tell them that wear a mask and you're okay. This has changed the world, and we need to adapt in this situation.
Doreen?
Thanks. Couple comments. I think it sounds to me, this proposal sounds a little complicated, and it might sway people to decide not to attend town meeting. And I would just like to maybe have the discussion, Ray, of the pros and cons of having an outdoor town meeting as another option. And then I will say that I believe that Shrewsbury, who is a representative town meeting, is postponing theirs until July or August. And I would be in favor of maybe at least waiting until a later phase of guidance from the state to, I know that we're not going to be in the clear in 2020 and we have to hold town meeting at some point, but that's another option I'd like to discuss is, do we wait until some of the guideline restrictions are taken off and people are starting to get back to some sense of normalcy, and we have more time to plan, Candy has more time to plan, and yeah, so that's it. So maybe just holding it off for another month. June is going to be here very quickly, and I feel like it's a little premature, and a little complicated, that some people might show up at town meeting and say, where am I going? Am I going in a classroom? Am I going in this place? And I don't know if we're going to have time to communicate that to people in the next 4 weeks. So I always encourage people to come to town meeting, and it's, this is the hardest time to hold something like this. So I'm trying to think about other options. And so, Ray, getting back to my first comment about an outdoor town meeting, I'd like to hear from you and maybe the rest of the board on what the pros and cons are of having an outdoor town meeting.
I got one thing, Jen. So a couple things with that issue is we're in a very unique situation with our town moderator. Town moderator's up. I'm sure if you push to July, we're going to have this election first. And Ray, you could potentially be off the hook if that happens, right?
I will not be here in July.
Right.
Not that you need me, but I'm just saying I won't be here.
Well, right. So I think given the circumstances with our back up against the wall with that election coming up, I think it behooves us to try to make this work as best as possible. As complicated as it's going to be, it's the best we can do to have our government have people come and vote on these articles.
Donna?
Yeah, Doreen just raised this. I'm concerned about communication. We need to assure people that this is the safe alternative. We need to give them clear guidance on what it means if they don't come into town meeting and if they're only doing the drive-by. We can't rely on social media. We've got to get out to every one of our registered voters to say, this is a unique situation. Here's our unique solution, but here's what it means for you. And the number one reason we're doing this is for your safety. So please make the choice that's best for you in your situation. And here's what that is. If it's a drive-by, it's a drive-by. But if there's something else, we need to just over-communicate. And I don't know whether or not we've got the resources to do that between now and June 20th. But that's my concern.
Yeah, now, keep in mind is that this is not a flawless system. But my job as moderator is to put on a town meeting on June 20th, unless the board changes that date. So I have to come up with something. So I'm unbelievably open to other ideas, thinking out of the box, some other way of doing it. It really doesn't matter to me. But right now, my job is to put on a town meeting on June 20th. And that's what I have to work towards.
Jen, can I talk for 2 seconds?
Sure. So
the Hopkinton, New Hampshire, as Ray mentioned, they had 9-to-1 voting for people to drive through. I'll send out the YouTube. It's an interesting video that they took, and then the news article that went along with it. But Ray, I don't want to challenge you necessarily, but I just want to kind of talk through Article 1 gets put on, they make a motion, it gets seconded. And then if someone made a motion to have that be a ballot, we would have to set up to have a ballot, and then we'd get through that process. Then we would go in and have Article 2. I mean, why can't we just have a motion for every article to be a ballot, and then just have everybody who's in the room that wanted to go to risk whatever they were risking to go vote live in person, and the rest of the folks who are watching at home get a complete ballot with all the questions. They get registered just like they did if they were doing the one question in Hopkinton, and they vote on the whole slate, and that's what the registrars count after town meeting is over.
So, and again, the way it works is the motion gets put on the floor, it gets seconded, it gets discussed, and it gets voted on and gets closed. You can't do it unless somebody from the state tells me that I can put the Grafton Town Meeting on a full ballot, on a paper ballot, discuss every article, and then have people vote like they vote on, on a regular election. That has never been. It's never happened. It has never taken place, and it's totally against all of the rules and regulations of town meetings.
But it's just really an extension of the idea of the drive-through for the one question. You're just applying it to 34 articles. So if we got permission.
Well, no, because if you put the Article 34 or whatever it is, the last one, you put it on the floor, you seconded it, you discussed it, then discussion is closed, we're going to vote. That's how it goes. It doesn't, that wouldn't take any different process than a regular motion, other than we are going to allow drive-up voting. That's the only difference. It's really the only difference.
I know, it's either packaging it all together as one or doing it one at a time. Could you imagine if every article we had now was called for a ballot question? Possible.
That can happen.
Well, I know, that's what I'm thinking, to make for the convenience of the voting public, you wouldn't want Candy to set up 36 times for a ballot vote inside the building. So if we got permission from whomever, I don't know who would grant that permission to do it the way we stated. If we're comfortable with that concept, should we try to get the answer to that question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that seem like I mean, it's a reasonable, if we had one article, would we all agree that that would be the way we would do it? We'd have a drive-up vote like they did in Hopkinton?
I would say yes. And I think that the other thing that we could do is approach this from the opposite end to say, what do we need to be able to conduct town meetings safely, and how do we pursue that end goal? And maybe we ought to start asking our state legislature about whether or not there can be an order from Beacon Hill that would suspend the ballot voting so that we could get this done safely.
Donna?
We've used the one example from Hopkinton, New Hampshire, as a possibility. I mean, every other 351 towns and communities, whatever, in the state have to come up with a town meeting solution. So what else is out there for creative ideas or different ideas, or what do they do? I know not everybody has it in May, or have different circumstances, but I'm just wondering, some people only have to have an annual one.
Yeah, there's two solutions, right? There's representative town meeting, there's open town meeting, which we have. Some people are doing different venues. Some are going to the Worcester Centrum, DCU Center, Mechanics Hall, wherever those big places would be. So you have that as an option under the legislation. You can pick another venue. I still think you run into the same problem with someone who's 65 plus or autoimmune issues. They're still not going to those places. Parking's an issue, cost, time. So then there's the field, there's the logistics of making that happen, which, if we made the decision that's where we want to go, we got to kind of plan for the seating, the outdoor bathrooms, handicap accessibility to get people down to the field. We got to do all those logistical planning now if that's the route we want to go. When we saw the video, that was kind of like, oh, if we could do that, and then realizing that other people have other concerns about other articles, we're hyper-focused on the contingent budget, and rightfully so, but there are other people that have other interests. We want to accommodate everybody. So that's why we kind of went down that road of, can we expand the idea to have it be a ballot initiative through drive-through for all articles versus any. But to give you a snapshot of what other folks are doing, everybody, Upton's scheduled for the 23rd. Southbridge is scheduled for the 29th. So people, Millbury's the 23rd. Shrewsbury's going on 1/12 budget because I don't think they're going until July. They were originally scheduled for the 27th as well. But I don't think they're going to go that route. And just so the board knows and the community knows, just, belts and suspenders here relative to town meeting. I'm hoping on the 9th, under the rules of 1/12 budgeting, the select board has to vote to adopt the 1/12 budget. So I'm going to try to put something before you to vote on that 1/12 budget on the 9th, just so you're aware of it. So we can, in the worst case scenario, if we can't have town meeting on the 20th for some reason, at least we'll have a budget in place for July 1. So at least my goal is to make you aware of it and then get it before you on the 9th. So a couple different currents in the same stream there, but I hope that answered your question, Donna, and then give you some insight into the 9th of June.
Okay, I just had a couple of things. Again, I just want to reiterate that there are other important things at town meeting, and although I understand that that's the biggest one and a drive up for only one is what you're saying we can only do. I don't know if, there's some people that they have to come into the building if they want to participate, but other people don't have to come into the building to participate, depending on what article they're there to vote on. So I just worry about, I just don't think that's equitable for some people. If the thing that they're interested in, they have to come into the building, but for the contingency budget, they do not. So there was that. I did want to check in with Candy, just in terms of election workers and some of these scenarios, would require quite a few people. And do you have the people willing to work? And because I have to tell you that with all of these plans, I just would rather postpone it. I want people to be safe. I would rather postpone it until July or August, until we have a better, the governor has a plan to reopen. If everything else is reopening and he feels like things are going to be safe as we go through the summer, I feel like we should postpone it, but I'll have Candy answer about election workers.
So currently, as of right now, I did give all the wardens and election workers a deadline of Friday to get back to me. So there are still some up in the air, but I have 23 people that are willing to work the election, that are not anybody that has reached out in the community. And there is a way to get a waiver from the state to reduce our election workers on election day. So I think that these people are also willing to work town meeting. The wardens were supposed to secure both. So I think we'll be okay. And then we do have some interested people in the town that we could possibly, ask for help. Emergency management might be an option too for some of the scenario, for flow and logistics, I guess, too, getting people in and out. I know the town of Hadley, I think it was, Hadley just had their election, and she recapped everything that they did, and it gave me some more ideas as well. And she utilized a bunch of different people. So I think we're good, election worker, and then the people in the community that are willing to help out will be okay.
You can, as we talked about before, you can have it outside. Within the space of the football field, not including the track or anything like that, you can fit 1,250 people. And there is a drive, there is a road that goes from the parking lot to the field, which you would have to have some type of golf carts or bus to transport, handicapped people in it and people who have tough time walking. But you can do that. It will require renting chairs and require renting jumbotrons, and it's a possibility to have it outside there. You would need to set a rain date. And that way there, everybody's on the field. That's not including filling the stands. You can fill the stands also.
Karen, do you have anything?
I mean, in terms of ideas, obviously, the more spaced out the people are, the better. As someone who's never had good luck with outdoor events growing up at all, I always get concerned about rain dates and everything like that and the logistics around it. But it is probably, out of the options from the health side of the world, the best option, just because you have the open space. And I know, compared to, yes, we could be spaced out in the various buildings, but obviously there's bigger concerns of you're in an enclosed space with hundreds of your closest town neighbors and everything. Other than that, it's really comes down to, regardless of what we do, is just making sure if there's microphones or, if we were ever going to use the voting buttons, making sure that there's sanitation done in between. If someone touches the microphone and the next person comes up, making sure that that gets sanitized in between. If there's ballots being handed out, making sure there's practices so, you're not potentially giving someone cross-contaminated ballots. And then the biggest thing I can think of, regardless of it, is, making sure, because everyone stresses keeping lists of who attends events, and it goes to businesses such as even down to hair salons, who comes in for your appointments. We would have to have something, because if heaven forbid someone was found to have attended town meeting that turned up positive after the fact, we'd have to try to figure out who they came into close contact with. So we'd need names, addresses, phone numbers of who was there.
Did we lose Jen? I think we
think
did,
so.
Doreen.
Yeah. We did. Go ahead, Donna.
I would suggest a tent, and for two reasons. One, it might help us if it rains, and two, I've had 4 melanomas. I can't sit in the sun, and there's a lot of elderly. If it's a 93-degree day or whatever it might be, and the sun's beating on people, or anybody, any of age, so that might be a solution. It's expensive, but the jumbotrons are going to be expensive too. So, but I think that's going to be one way, open-sided, to keep that open space, but another consideration.
I don't know about the tent on the field and it's turf. I have no idea if that's going to hold or can have a tent. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying I don't know because it's turf.
Anyone else on the board have a question for Karen? No. Karen, I have one question. Do you think in your role there's any benefit at all for us to consider waiting on town meeting? Is it going to make any sense to have it in July versus June?
Personal opinion, since I can't obviously speak for the rest of the board of health members, I lean towards waiting, but there's a big unknown. We always hear about this potential second wave. Everyone's talking about if there's a second wave, it will be in the fall or winter, but honestly, it's so new a virus, we don't know. Is there going to even be a second wave, and is it truly going to be the fall or the winter, or could it come up and rear its ugly head because maybe we are reopening too quickly? I don't know. That's the hard part.
Thank you. Donna?
Would we be having to take everybody's temperature too? I mean, that's one of the recommendations from the governor, and I think, that's one of the precautions you take if you're gathering.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid point to, especially, if we're going to be inside of all things where it's a more enclosed space for circulated air, taking a temperature wouldn't hurt, let's put it that way, to make sure it's not foolproof, because someone, as we've heard as time's gone on, there's plenty of people who don't have symptoms, don't have a fever, but yet they have it. So, but it's not a bad thing to do, other than obviously time and effort.
Sorry, I'm back again.
Thanks, Jen. We're just asking, the board was just asking questions directly to Karen.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're finishing up with that.
So I think the question for the board is do you want to have it on June 20th or do you want to put it off? And I think really that's the only question. If we're going to have it on June 20th, then let's put together a plan on making it happen. If you're not going to do it on June 20th, then pick a date that you're going to extend it to and come up with a plan for that date. I think that's really what it is.
Madam Chair, personally, I think we keep the June date, because if things start going sideways, let's say a week up till town meeting, to Karen's point, if things start to ramp up too rapidly and we realize, okay, this is, to everyone else's point, this is a risk that we don't take. The moderator has the right, which I found out last week, the moderator has the right to postpone town meeting. So they can postpone town meeting for 30 days.
Yep.
And see where it's at. So I don't think we change the date. I think we keep the date, we get up to it, and we realize that if things are still an acceptable way, then we go forward to Ray's point and everyone else who has input in this to their best abilities to keep everyone as safe as possible. Because I don't think you're going to be any safer in July than you will be in June. That's just how I feel. Or even in August or September. Because to your point, Karen, if one person who's asymptomatic shows up and they're in contact with a couple dozen people, well, then we're right back to where we were back in March with the same issue. So if we know that that's the known issue, if we know that that's the rate in which people become impacted by this virus, the moderator can postpone this for 30 days. And then if it's still not an ideal time, postpone it for another 30 days. And to Ray's point, we can pass 1/12 budgets.
Doreen?
Thanks, Jen. I hold a different position than Peter on this. I am more inclined to wait until July with more, more part of the reopening phase plan from the governor, so people feel like they, are more in the groove of going out, wearing masks, taking temperatures, and then we also have an opportunity to plan and communicate, which we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend. May is almost over. And I don't know if we have enough time to communicate a really good plan of what our town meeting is going to look like at this time. So that's my position. I'd want to wait till July. I don't think there's any reason to wait any longer than that. Like Karen said, there could be a second peak, and we may have to move back on the phases that the governor has put in place. So, but I think June's a little too soon.
Donna?
I've seen the governor's recommendations, and I know there's 4 phases. I didn't pay close attention to each one of them, but we've had the restriction on gatherings. It was down to 10 people. I know they're still recommending face masks and distancing, et cetera, washing your hands. But are there continued recommendations for each phase in terms of how many people? I can't imagine that we're going from this date to a little bit more than a month from now to 450 people in the same facility. Maybe I'm wrong. So I don't know. As I said, does anybody know the answer to that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could just, office space was at 25% capacity this week. That's what was allowed. And religious gatherings had to have rules in place, but they could go to 40% capacity. Legislative bodies, however, are exempt from these rules.
Okay.
So the legislative body, 2,000 people come, they can gather because it's the legislative body.
Which, in my opinion, doesn't mean we should necessarily, just because if the governor has recommended in other parts that we don't gather more than 10 people. So I'm with Doreen. I think we should postpone it. I mean, I don't think we can do the 1/12 budgeting. I just want to make sure people are safe. And I understand we don't know what will happen, come and go. And listen, I may not be there either, Ray. So it's not.
Oh,
it just is what it is.
Really,
So,
I've been doing this 20 years. I don't make my last meeting. It's not a big deal. I want the meeting to go smooth, and I want people to be safe, and I want everybody to get their say and everybody to get their vote. That's all it is.
Yeah.
My job up to that election day. After that, it's not my job anymore. So, it doesn't matter.
Donna?
I guess I'd like to know from Tim and Beck whether or not, the department heads can take their own responsibilities for whoever would be advocating for communications. Like, what is our communication plan? How are we going to make certain that people know this drive-by provision, if this is what we're going to do? That these are, when is the warrant being published? Is it, I know in the past it's been a couple weeks ahead of time. What are we going to do to over communicate than what we've done in the past? Because there are so many differences in the way that we're going to proceed with this town meeting.
The three things we'll rely on, obviously local cable. We rely on the local press, provided they can get the information right. I don't mean to dig at them too much, but of recent we've had issues. A reverse 911 call, at least 2 of them will have to be placed if the venue or the date changes. And then the social media, word of mouth, those 5-pronged attack, if you will be the method that we communicate the changes, whatever we decide.
Just as a follow-up, Tim, what about our senior population?
If they're not signed up for Code Red, the robocall and inside the senior center, they have a program and they have a listing to communicate whatever information we want to get out to be consistent. So there's no guarantee that we'll hit everyone. We can also do a direct mailing like I talked about earlier that Candy's doing on Friday. With whatever plan we come up with, we can do that same direct mailing. It'll cost $3,600, $5,000, depending on the zip codes and the amount of paper we put into it, but we can do that as well.
I would prefer that method, to tell you the truth. I think it's our best method. And if we're talking about renting jumbotrons and tents or whatever, I think $3,600 is probably a cheaper alternative.
I agree.
Okay. Oh, sorry. You're in the corner on my screen, Ed. So when your hand's at, you're totally up against, so I miss it sometimes. Ed.
So just the other thing that we can do, I mean, again, to tie in the discussion that we've already had, to the extent that we are allowing people to come into the meeting to talk about their warrant articles, that's on this video. And, this video is easily distributable to thousands and thousands of people. And then put up online, you're going to get most of the views that you need. It's been my experience on there. We'll get, like Ray said, 450, 600 voters, maybe at town meeting. You're going to get 3,000 voters for an override election. That's about 15% of our overall populace. Those people know what's up and they know where to go for their information and they know to come here. So to the extent that we can provide them as much information as possible before town meeting, that should make things go a little more smoothly.
Anything else? Doreen.
I just want to say one more thing about my position on holding off. So I believe that, or I was given some information that there are some cities or towns that are representative town meeting, like Brookline, Lexington, Milton, South Hadley, Arlington, Fairhaven, that are looking to do an online with virtual reps. And I think the state Senate passed it and they're waiting. So, it could be an opportunity for us to talk about, can we do the whole warrant as a drive-through or not? What are our options for open town meeting if the state is changing requirements for representation of town meeting? That, I think if we gave ourselves a few more weeks, we might be able to find some answers to those questions and make it a little smoother.
The representative town meeting, actually, during it's a lot easier because they can do a WebEx, they can do a Zoom, because there's only, as over in Shrewsbury, and the last number that I knew of over in Shrewsbury was 284 representatives at town meeting. Very easily put a WebEx together and have town meeting, very easily. We can't do that. Someone actually suggested that to me. Well, why don't you do a WebEx? And I went, oh my God, we'd never be able to control it. You couldn't control it. So it just, and I don't want to belabor this, and I don't want to. My wife just came outside and looked at me and said, "Are you still there?" But we really need to. If the board's going to make a decision, if I'm going to make a decision on what we're going to do and when we're going to have it, we really need to do it before June 5th. So either we move forward by June 5th, or we cancel it, or we postpone it. So it really needs to get done, because advertising and all of the logistics that we have to put together, it's just not going to happen. So, but I'll put a date on it of June 5th that we'll make a decision. Unless you guys make a decision tonight, it's totally up to you.
Donna?
I mean, do we pursue a WebEx or a Zoom? We've been doing them at work with 800 participants, and somebody else moderates the activity that's going on, but it's very limited who can speak.
You're
And-
absolutely correct. The problem is that I would need to moderate that, and I would need to control who speaks and who doesn't speak and everything like that. And it's just, at work, it's a lot easier because you're at work and you all work for the same person. You all work for the same company. At town meeting, everybody has an opinion and everybody wants their opinion heard. And it's not something you can control. So you're not all talking about the exact same thing. Everybody has all their own opinions. I went through this, Don, I've had numerous discussions about all of this stuff, and that WebEx actually came up, and it would be a nightmare to try to moderate.
Just logistically though, Jen, if I can just chime in, with an open town meeting, you got 11,000 registered voters. How do you check them in virtually would be the thing. And we're worried about folks that are income deprived or an older generation that's not as efficient with computers, where they're disenfranchised automatically because they're not able to participate.
Right.
Those two big hurdles. I hate having all the hurdles, but those are all hurdles.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Maureen, did I see your hand up?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we change the date of town meeting from June 20th to July 18th, 2020. And we discuss the logistics of it in the coming meetings.
Do I have a second? I will second for, Donna, second for discussion. All right, Ed?
Yeah, I'm sort of ambivalent about this, and I understand the concerns about public safety. I think I sort of feel a little bit like Peter in that I don't think we're going to be in a materially different place on mid-July with coronavirus than we are in June. And the downside of moving it, obviously, is there are people that we want to hire with the contingent budget money that a month later, that might make more of a difference than I would see upside to coronavirus. That having been said, I want to make sure if we're moving it, we're using those 3 weeks wisely. So I'd like to hear a little bit more of an articulation about what we would need those 3 or 4 weeks for that we're going to accomplish, rather than just sort of, I feel like there's more of a nervousness here and an instinctive want to delay than there is a need for further planning. So I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Madam Chair.
Doreen, I think Jen's frozen again, so you got it.
Yeah, I think she froze. Peter, go ahead.
Thanks, yeah. I just see this look like just Jen just staring at her like, come on, Jen. She froze. All right.
Sometimes it's how she looks at me, so I couldn't tell.
I wanted to say that, again, if we keep it the same date, the moderator has the ability to delay, okay, given circumstances. And I think if you leave it up to a bunch of different people with different personalities, I really think leaving it up to the one person who actually runs the town meeting should have that sole responsibility. So I'm going to vote no on this motion tonight for that reason, because I know that we have a mechanism in place to delay town meeting if it isn't right to have it in June. So let's say in 2 weeks from now, the moderator decides, you know what, guys, I'm not liking any of these solutions. We're going to postpone to July. They don't have to wait for us. Moderator can do that. It's written there for them to do that. So again, that's the only reason why I'm voting no, because we have somebody who has that authority to delay the town meeting for those reasons. Thank you.
But Peter is correct. The moderator actually controls whether the meeting happens or it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
I would, and I had mentioned this before, that I would like to get the two people who are running for moderator involved in this discussion, just in case it does get pushed off, because whoever wins the election is going to need to jump into the frying pan for sure. So I'd like to get them involved also.
Well, you just brought up a great point, Ray, that I haven't considered, and that is that you are very seasoned at running town meetings, and this is probably going to be the trickiest town meeting that our town has ever seen. And so we do have to take that into consideration as well.
It is going to be a little difficult, yeah.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
So, Ed, I wanted to answer your question too. I personally do not want to delay town meeting. I feel that my reasoning for putting this motion on the floor is, one, public safety. And so, it's not fear of what's going to happen at town meeting. It's more of, does it make sense to wait longer? Is that going to provide any more safety in the community, or at least for people to feel safe enough to attend town meeting? So that's number one. And the second thing is, I'd really like to try to make this decision tonight if we can, because I think no matter if it's June or July, that we give our public an answer. And we start, so the planning and logistics of it, the more we communicate, the better. The more time we have to communicate, the better. But if it's June, it's June. And I just think that instead of putting it off another 2 weeks and having an answer, that we should just make a decision if we can tonight. So any other discussion while we wait for Jen? Ed, did I answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. And I appreciate that. I didn't mean to suggest that we weren't really concerned about public safety. I think that's the driving force between just an instinctive desire to pump the brakes a little bit, to find out what it is we don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And to be able to address that. My only concern is, again, and I don't think I phrased it quite right the time before, there's an upside to delaying and a downside to delaying. The upside to delaying is you can find out what the unknown is and have time to address it. The downside to delaying is twofold. Number one, there are legitimate issues that would be best if we took up sooner rather than later. And number two, I think most importantly, as Ray articulated, he's not going to be there in July. And this is going to be the most challenging town meeting that perhaps the town has ever faced from a logistical perspective. And I think that merits legitimate concern. I'm concerned that the difference between our ability to provide a safe environment on June 20th versus July 20th might be marginal at best. There might not be any effective difference between what we're doing in June versus July. It's in my cynical nature, I sincerely doubt that the state is going to come up with some miracle way for everybody to interact, 450 people together in a building, between June and July. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think you're going to hear the same thing, which is maintain distance, try not to touch anything, wear a mask, and put up plastic safeguards if you can in areas that you can. I think that's sort of it. Whereas the downside is we delay a month, the conditions are the same, and town meeting is completely chaotic at one of the most important town meetings that we've ever had, which includes an override, marijuana issues, and all the rest of it. So we couldn't have set this up any better. So that's my concern. And I don't mean to minimize concerns about public safety. I'm concerned about that as well. I don't think I'm seeing the difference in what we're going to provide as a public safety service from one month to another.
Donna?
I think I think that Ray's argument was the most persuasive to me in terms of utilizing his expertise. And I would propose that we go forward with the June 20th. However, I'd also like to propose that we have a meeting next Tuesday so that we have a better understanding of our logistics and we have a better communication plan in place so that even if we can roll it out before next Tuesday, but I think in terms of let's find out what our options are in terms of rentals, setting up this drive-by, whatever it may be, and have that more information available for us on next Tuesday. So that's my thought.
Can we, Dawn, on that note, if I don't have a problem attending your meeting next Tuesday, but can we put together a small committee just real quick? Me, Tim, Becca, Candy, whoever else on the board that wants to do it. We can meet during the week. We can, do a Zoom call during the week and come up with ideas and things like that, so that we're not waiting another week to try to put together more ideas and get more ideas from more people.
Okay.
Maybe there are other. If Milbury's having theirs, if whoever else is having theirs, maybe they've got better ideas. I don't know. And then by next Tuesday, have something. Have a little more concrete, ideas in place.
That's a great plan, Ray. I think Jen, are you on the phone here?
I'm on the phone, so I can't run the meeting because I can't see anybody, but I'm here listening.
That's okay.
So.
Okay, so our discussion was really just, I think, concludes that maybe I should take my motion off the table and there'll be a new motion.
Just table the motion, Doreen, for next week.
All right, I'll table the motion for next week.
We're not supposed to meet next week. Are you saying next meeting or next week?
We just decided that we should meet next Tuesday to discuss when we're going to hold town meeting. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, just a couple of dates that Ray said that he mentioned was that we should make a decision no later than June 5th to his comments. So if we do put this on for June 2nd, that is our next regularly scheduled meeting. But I think more importantly, I think given the logistics and the amount of time that whoever's going to, I'm not going to be around, unfortunately, to be part of this group, but whoever's going to do it on our board, it gives them at least 2 weeks to really lay out the logistics, to Donna's point, to lay out a communications plan, if and when and how we're going to do it. And if it doesn't work out, like things are just kind of falling apart, then to your point, we take up your motion again on the 2nd, and then we make that decision on that day.
Madam, well, I guess I'm still running the meeting. Does it make sense for us to vote on the date tonight, though, especially since Peter isn't going to be able to attend next week's meeting? Do we want to?
Well, the date is the date. You already.
No, I didn't say that. I wouldn't be able to attend like the special group, like the special committee that Ray had mentioned. I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth to do that.
I see. Okay, and the date is the date. It's already set.
The date. Yep, that's it.
Jen, anything else?
So I apologize because I missed stuff. So are you rescinding your motion or you're tabling your motion? Because you guys want to meet next week just on this, or from what Peter said, it sounded like we could have the same, we don't necessarily have to meet next week. We can meet on June 2nd like we normally do. But if everybody wants to meet next week and add a meeting, that's fine. But it sounds like we could also do this also on the 2nd.
Go ahead, Donna.
I don't know whether or not you heard, Jen, but Ray was suggesting a subcommittee meet in the next few days with Candy and himself and Tim and Beck and whomever else, and probably a representative from the board. And then I was suggesting that we should meet next Tuesday so that we know what the logistics are and can communicate that, and also have a communication plan and how we're going to go out to the townspeople and let them know what our plans are. And I wouldn't want to wait until June 2nd to do that, I guess.
Okay.
And then Jen, to add more thing, we came to the realization too that this is going to be the most complicated town meeting Grafton's ever seen, and that Ray expertise versus someone new to the position, it may make more sense to keep the date at June. And so based on that, we need to have these conversations sooner rather than later to communicate to the public on, you know, the safest, best way to attend town meeting. And that's why we decided that setting up a meeting next week makes sense.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I will also say I'm happy to volunteer to be the select board person in the discussions with Ray and Beck and Tim before next week.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
I mean, I can also do it. I did it as I participated the first time we had a meeting, but yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay.
Anything else on this discussion, or are we ready to move on? Give me a moment. I have to pull up the agenda one more time. Technical difficulties this evening. My internet is also really slow. I'm not able to.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if I can help with the logistics, do you need a motion from one of us to appoint you to be on this committee?
Yes, please. Peter.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we appoint Doreen DeFazio to work with the town clerk, town moderator, town administrator on logistics and planning for town meeting.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Donna?
I would just amend that to say the assistant town administrator as well.
Okay, thank you.
Or
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Yeah.
Stock eye.
Honest, aye.
Fazio, aye. Motion is passed. Peter, I'm unable to pull up the agenda right now.
So next up, Madam Chair, if I may, through you, the
Yes.
Vice Chair and the Madam Chair, next up we have Select Board Handbook.
Hey,
I apologize.
good night, everybody.
Good night,
Bye, Ray.
Ray. Thanks for your
Hi,
time.
Ray.
Thank
Bye,
you, Ray.
Candy.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Candy.
Thanks, Candy.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Everybody.
Thank you, Karen.
Can I ask
Well, before we get
Wait,
there,
guys, I'm sorry. Candy, did you have a question? I'm
Do
sorry.
you need anything else further from me? I thought there was going to be, you had other questions. No, we're good?
yep.
Okay,
We're good.
Have a good night, Candy. Thank you.
Thank you, Candy.
bye-bye.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt in the process, but before we get there, we moved off the FY21 budget and we haven't finalized our budget yet. I know FinCom's waiting for a budget from us, and we're getting perilously close to our scheduled town meeting. Are we leaving this off for June 2nd? I suppose we have to, although we could take it up next week while we're here.
If I may, so that was part of my rationale for asking if we're having a meeting next week and if we can schedule it, then I don't see why we couldn't bring it up. I was just saying on the 2nd because that was our next regular scheduled meeting. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it. If we are having that meeting scheduled next Tuesday, we can simply add that and just finalize it up and get that over to FinCom. And we can decide one way or another, what does this look like and moving on.
Yeah, I think we should. Okay.
I agree with that too. I mean, if we're meeting anyway, it makes complete sense that we do that as soon as possible.
Okay.
right, anyone else on that subject? Jen? So Jen, so adding the budget discussion onto the, and we can talk offline, I guess, about the agenda, but adding both to the agenda, the town meeting discussion and the budget discussion for next week.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the Selectmen Handbook. Donna, you had brought this up to the board, so do you want to start the discussion on this tonight?
Yeah, this is something that was provided by MMA. It's a generic handbook. I found it very helpful seeing it for the first time, and things that, it's a good reference guide, to tell you the truth, and it gives a brand new select person the opportunity to really understand what it is they're supposed to do. And I think it gives everybody else another reference point too for things that they may encounter in their role as the select board member that may not be typical. It gives resources, it gives sites for Mass General laws, and from my understanding, a number of select boards have adopted these. So I talked about it. Peter sent around something similar. It was almost the exact same language. Some of them have personalized them, but as I said, I hope everybody had the chance to at least thumb through it, but it's good information.
So is the purpose here to adopt this as Grafton's select board handbook?
I'll move that we accept this as our handbook.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just briefly, I flipped through it. I liked it. There's a lot in here. The MMA does a good job. A lot of this stuff is very similar to what they put out concerning financial management. A lot of the stuff is sort of similar to what the MMA Finance Committee organization did, except obviously there's concerning who owns the budget, there's always a bone of contention there, but the local government nerds can hash that out. There are things in here that we should revisit. In particular, there is a discussion about whether or not you want to adopt Robert's rules to run meetings, or whether I think there's a sort of a low rent version of that might be a little bit easier for people to understand. I think it's Charles rules or something like that. We really should have that discussion at some point about, because I think we have a general understanding about protocol for the meetings, but we could do with more of a refresher on that. But overall, I thought this is a good resource.
Jen, I'm just checking. Do you have anything to add to this discussion? Since I can't see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, but no. I mean, I'm all for having some sort of reference document, so I'm good.
Okay, Donna?
Yeah, to Ed's point, I think there are some recommendations that I've seen in other communities, and also kind of mirror what Peter and I had as an experience as school committee members, where they gave you real guidelines on what your roles and responsibilities were for select boards and for any appointed board or committee. And I've seen some of those, and I think having, adopting whatever it is for rules and making certain that the agendas are similar, et cetera. So I'd also like to work on that and bring those forward, and maybe if somebody else wants to work on that. But there are some guidelines out there that I think would be helpful for us to establish that would apply to all of our committees. I think there's situations that have arisen that this would address, and everybody would be able to point to the same thing and saying, here's what the scope of our responsibilities are, and here's what's outside of our scope.
Yeah.
So.
Peter?
So like whenever we adopt anything like this, personally, I'd like to have our legal counsel review it to make sure there's no conflicts that are in here that may be conflicting with our charter. I would hate to have us to have two documents, one that says, this is what you do as your handbook, but yet we have something over here that's kind of overarching and governing, right? So if there's any point that before we adopt this, that we go through that process and just codify that that this handbook doesn't grant more or any less authority over what the board already has today based on the bylaws and charter, our local charter.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, point taken. I think I'm sure that people at MMA, legally reviewed it, but it makes sense to have our legal counsel take a look at it. Do we want to still vote on it tonight? And then with the understanding that we would have town council just take a look? Donna?
Yeah, I think, and I can go either way on this, Peter, but I think it's a handy reference, and it's specifically for select board. It's not setting things in stone. So as I said, I found it when I was going through it. Oh, I wish I'd known about this, or there was a really good suggestion in there, and I'm just trying to remember what it was. Oh, that we should be meeting with our department heads on a regular basis, or schedule annual meetings so that we hear from them. So I mean, it's not something that we've done since I've been on the board, or that I remember having happened before. So just to make certain that people, understand the direction that we're going in, or share information back and forth. So I thought that was a really good suggestion. When we get into some of the policies that apply to all of the boards, I think that's where we would definitely want our legal counsel to say, this is what's in your bylaws, this is what's in your charter. This would be a change, this would be a minor change, this would be a major change, this may need further discussion or further reference, or whatever it may be. So
maybe see what that looks like, Donna, like afterwards. If there's significant like structural changes, I would like to know what they are before I vote on yes. And vice versa, right? So I think, taking a binding vote like this, I know this is a guide, and it's just for guidelines only. Some people, I think, could interpret this handbook as the one true faith and what you do. But keep in mind that we didn't elect each other here to be on the board. The people in the town elected us to be on the board. And they have set forth guidelines for us in which we operate within our bylaws and our own charter and even Mass state law. So I would like to see that first. Personally, I'm not against something like having this, but I would like to know ultimately at the end of the day, what is it that we're voting on? If there are any significant changes that would have to be made to a handbook that would meet Grafton's requirements.
Okay, so do we go ahead with the motion on the table, and with the understanding that this will go to town council before we adopt it?
As long as we understand it's non-binding.
Yes, until legal counsel. Okay, so by roll call?
Carlson, aye.
Okay.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye.
All right, motion is carried.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
You're on mute, Doreen.
Thank you. All right, so motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor by roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Frisbee, aye.
Aye.
Fazio, aye.
Thomas, aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.